council in silent prayer, remembering the city we love and the troops overseas protecting our liberties. Amen.
Amen.
Councilman, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilman McIntosh. Councilwoman Martin.
Here.
Councilman Slackton.
Here.
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Councilman Simmons.
Here.
Councilwoman Simons.
Here.
Councilman Lockhart.
Here.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Welcome to our meeting here this evening at City Hall. Hopefully, most of you are parked within the parking lot and not at the place that tows your cars, which also known as the post office. But not a guarantee they will, but it might happen. So don't be surprised if we don't interrupt the proceedings here for a little bit. Anyone who would wish to speak, we're going to ask that you fill out one of the cards in the back. That would be really nice, so that when you come up, you can go ahead and give the card to Diane. The first public comment is going to be on agenda items. And so at this time, anyone wishing to speak on agenda items only. And I will remind you that there will be time to speak on the shelter issue and the ordinances that they're on. If you want to comment then, that's probably a good idea. The rest of the agenda items, we probably want to talk now. So come forward, please, if you have to talk on any agenda items.
Yes, Rick Steinmeier. What I consider the agenda is the operation of this homeless shelter. Question I have is, it says it has inspections, but it doesn't say by who, when, how often, who's paying for it, and who to answer to. I'd like an answer to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else this time? Please come forward. Any agenda items besides the shelter ordinances, and we can take that comment at that time. Anyone? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and carry on to proclamations and presentations. And this time, let's see, we're going to go ahead and, yeah, here we go. Now we're going to skip that one. It's here yet. There we go. All right, this is a proclamation, let's see, proclaiming April 2013 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And at this time, could Aaron Stitt please come forward? Aaron?
Good.
Good. Aaron, who are you with?
Florida Department of Children and Families.
Okay, good. Good to have you here, Benita. Whereas Florida's future prosperity depends on nurturing the healthy development of more than 4 million children currently living, growing, and learning within our diverse communities. And whereas research shows that safe and nurturing relationships and stimulating stable environments improve brain development and the well-being of children, while neglect and abusive experiences and unstable or stressful environments increase the odds of poor children outcomes. And whereas the abuse and neglect of children can cause severe, costly, and lifelong problems affecting all of society, including physical, mental, and health problems, school failure, and criminal behavior. And whereas research also shows that parents and caregivers who have social networks and know how to seek help in times of trouble are more resilient and better able to provide safe environments and nurturing experiences for their children. And whereas individuals, businesses, schools, and faith-based and community organizations must make children a top priority and take action to support the physical, social, emotional, and educational development and competency of all children. And whereas during the month of April, Prevent Child Abuse Florida, in collaboration with the Florida Department of Children and Families, will be engaging communities throughout the state in a coordinated effort to prevent child abuse and neglect by promoting the awareness of healthy child development, positive parenting practices, and the types of concrete support families need within their communities. Now, therefore, I, Ben Nelson, proclaim on behalf of City Council and the citizens of Bonita Springs, April 2013 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Thank you so much for everything that you and your organization do for our communities and especially for our children. Everyone, please give this gentleman a hand. Okay.
Hope you get more money.
And now, Lori Burke, are you here? Lori? Oh, come on forward. Okay, how do you do? And would you like to tell everybody who you're with? I can read from here, but they can't.
I'm with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD.
Okay, good. And whereas the city of Bonita Springs recognizes the importance of parents talking with their teens about alcohol, and whereas high school students who use alcohol or other substances are 5 times more likely to drop out of school or believe good grades are not important, and whereas teen alcohol kills about 5,000 people each year, more than all other illegal drugs combined, and whereas the majority of kids say their parents are their primary influence when it comes to decisions about drinking alcohol, and whereas Power Talk 21 Day is established on April 21st, 2013 to encourage parents and caregivers to embrace their important role influencing America's youth in their decisions about drinking alcohol. And whereas to equip parents to talk with their teens about alcohol, Mothers Against Drunk Driving Southwest Florida in April will offer free community parent workshops to give parents the tools in a parent handbook to effectively talk to their teens about alcohol. And whereas these local parent workshops, also replicated across the country, will offer parents a research-based parent handbook to help them talk with their teens about alcohol and encourage adults to consider creating safer community by becoming involved in reducing underage drinking. And whereas I urge all citizens to join in local and national efforts to raise awareness in the importance of parents and teens talking together about alcohol in order to reduce the risk and dangers posed to teens and communities. Now, therefore, I, Ben Nelson Jr., as the mayor of City of Bonita Springs, do hereby proclaim Sunday, April 21st, 2013, as Power Talk 21 Day in the City of Bonita Springs. Lori, thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you on behalf of the community. Would you like to say anything? No, that's okay.
Well, I would like to thank both you, Mayor, as well as the City Council members for inviting me here this evening. Power Talk 21 is an important day for our community's adults to speak with our youth in the community about underage drinking and the important decisions around that. Over 6,000 children die every year in drinking and driving crashes throughout the United States. And 1 in 3 middle schoolers, believe it or not, have tried alcohol, and most of those have also experienced binge drinking. So it's really important for us to speak to our children about underage drinking. And I appreciate your time and efforts in signing this proclamation. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. Thank you again. And we'll get a picture here if you want to take this one. There you go.
Thank you.
And thank you again. Thank you so much for what you do. Okay, now we have certificates of appreciation presented for the Big Dog Show. That's not what we usually say here at the council, but I like that, Big Dog Show. Chairman Nigel Fullock, would you please come forward? And Vice, I beg your pardon? Boy, you have a booming voice there, young man. You can come around this way. Come on. You can bring your little dog with you, too, if you want. Although dogs usually are not allowed in here. Vice Chairwoman Trish Leonard, please come forward. Susan Bridges, Jackie Hauserman, Janet Flanders, and Joan Lasitra. Sorry, is Joan here? And Joy Cooper's not here, is she? No? Okay. All right.
They're in order.
They're in order. Well, of course they are. Okay, we're going to present these certificates. I'll read this one. It's and by the way, the Big Dog Show, if you haven't seen them, there are a great amount of 15 dogs. Wonderful, great big dogs, big metal dogs standing out in front of the Lyles Hotel area right there at Riverside Park. It's a wonderful exhibit. Please go by there. Please see it. Please enjoy it. It's a wonderful thing. This group has worked so hard for this, our Art in Public Places and everyone else who's been involved with this. They've really worked really hard for this, and it is a wonderful exhibit for our community. Thank you so much on behalf of our community. And these are certificates of appreciation for Chairman Nigel Fullock for community spirit and outstanding volunteer support. All of a sudden, I feel like the Wizard of Oz. Huh, that's weird. Anyway.
I can say so many things right now.
Never mind. I know, but you will not. And outstanding volunteer support for the Big Dog Show 2003. Nigel, thank you so much for all you do, my good friend. Thank you so much. There you go. And this is for Chairwoman Trish Leonard. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Susan Bridges of the Art League. Thank you very much. Thank you. And Jackie Hauserman. Jackie. Thank you. Janet. Janet Flanders. There you go. Hi. Oops. Joan Lasitra. There you go. Thank you so much. Again, thank you, all of you, for what you do right now. And I believe, everyone please give them a hand first. I believe you have something else here for us, don't you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This obviously was a big deal, and it's not the Nigel Fullick Show, it's the Art and Public Places Board, because without this group, we couldn't have accomplished it. But to bring something that's a national exhibit to our town that has been around the country, and if you haven't seen it, one of the things that's really fun to go to the park and see how many people are down there, tourists, people from Naples, Fort Myers, who are coming to Bonita Springs to see this exhibit, because it's highly unusual, and you have to see an 8-foot tall dog that's 10 feet long and 15 of them, but it's unique. That being said, a very gracious gesture happened. If you were out at the presentation, it was the perfect day. The weather, we had 3 times as many people as we anticipated. The Center for the Arts in Bonita Springs, their staff were the servers for the entire day, did a phenomenal job. Everybody pitched in. Every single person who participated was a member of our community. I would be remiss if I did not mention Izzy and the dog track, who stepped up and delivered $2,500 to help get us home. So although they're not here tonight, that was great. We had a, let's see, 4.5, 5-foot tall dog that looked very much similar to the dog that our city manager, Mr. Carl Schwing, is holding in his hand. And we auctioned it off, and the winner, without any sort of collusion, was Dr. McIntosh, Dr. Steve McIntosh. And it took he and his wife, Connie, exactly 5 seconds to walk up and said they would like to donate that dog back to the city. The big deal is that dog is worth about $5,000. So thank you, Dr. McIntosh. Being as you couldn't take that dog, I know the only reason you wouldn't take it is it wouldn't fit in the car. We thought this came from Dale Rogers today, and this is on behalf of the Art and Public Places Board. You can put that in the yard, I'm sure, for you and Connie.
I'm going to give it back to the city.
Dr. Steve, thank you so much.
It was so awesome.
Thanks for making it a perfect day, Steve.
Everybody give Steve.
You named it, didn't you? What was your name for the dog?
We named the dog after our first family dog that raised our kids, Marley.
I'm not going there either.
But thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And you tell the dog stay? Stay?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, isn't the big dog from Dunk City here today?
Oh!
Big dog is here. Dunk City South.
At this time, we have a very, very special guest with us today. I believe you're all familiar with him. I believe the entire United States is familiar with him, and that little school that just got really big. Dr. Bradshaw, would you please come forward here? Florida Gulf University. There you go. There you go.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. That's awesome.
First of all,
Wonderful.
Dr. Bradshaw, you obviously, did you see our video that we made especially for you? Okay, that'll wait, that'll wait. It's like, yeah, I know it wasn't pretty, but it was, our hearts were in the right place, I have to tell you. We are so proud. Thank you so much for what you've done for our school and the progress you've made there. And that group of young men that have worked so hard for that, just got to make you burst at the seams. I know it does for us. We are so proud of the school, so proud of what the future lies, and we just had a mayors and managers meeting today. Every one of them there, we were arguing over who was claiming your university as being in, of course, you're in Bonita, of course.
Yes.
I couldn't convince them of that, but I tried real hard. We want to thank you with this proclamation, this small proclamation right here, but I have to tell you, from our hearts, it's thank you so much for doing what you do, for being the gentleman you are, for doing all the things for our young men and women. And I have to tell you, we're proud of all the teams, but this is special. Whereas Florida Gulf Coast University was founded in 1991, Florida's 10th state university. And whereas FGCU is the state of Florida's fastest growing university with 13,500 students, probably 14,000 right now, probably. I'm just saying that. I'm the mayor. I'm allowed to elaborate a little bit there. With student athletes having a combined grade point average of 3.6 to 4.0. And whereas FGCU has only had a Division I basketball program for 6 years, and whereas FGCU has only been eligible to compete in Division I tournament play for the last 2 years, and whereas the FGCU men's basketball team won the Atlantic Sun Conference, qualified for the 2013 NCAA tournament, and became the first number 15 seed in the 75-year history of the NCAA basketball tournament to reach the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
And whereas this team has taken a meteoric jump into the college basketball scene and into America's hearts with their passionate, intense, and proud play, and whereas FGCU men's basketball team has ramped up the excitement level in Southwest Florida and across the nation, and whereas the success of these high-flying Eagles has captured the entire region, has given us a sense of pride and put the name of a young university on the map, renaming Southwest Florida as what?
Dunk City.
Right? Right? They get a good grade for this. That's where that 4.0 comes in handy right there. Now, therefore, I, Ben Nelson Jr., as mayor of the city of Bonita Springs, on behalf of the city council and this community, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2013 as Florida Gulf Coast University Eagles Month in the city of Bonita Springs and everywhere else as well. Thank you so much for what you've done. Picture time. And we have to hear from you.
Oh, absolutely. How are y'all doing? Good. It's great to be here. Let me, Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you so much for this recognition. It means a lot to us. It has been a whirlwind these last 3 or 4 weeks for Florida Gulf Coast University and for Southwest Florida. Joanne and I, my wife, we went to New York City a few weeks ago on a Thursday. We had one of our students from the Bauer School of Music have her recital at Carnegie Hall. Awesome. And not only that, she played 2 original works. One composition was written by one of our faculty members at the university. We got on the plane the next morning about 6 o'clock, and we flew down to Macon to watch the ASUN, the conference tournament. And y'all know how that was and how that ended. It was very exciting, and it was very exciting for the fans who traveled there. And I found myself being a little ambivalent because I was getting emails and text messages from back here saying what a blast y'all were having here all over the region, and I just kind of wanted to experience that. So we made the ASUN tournament. We came back home. Then we went to Philadelphia. It was our town, folks. It was Eagle country. That whole town was rooting for FGCU. And wherever we went, and of course we wore Eagle garb, people actually wanted to buy the shirts off our backs because we didn't anticipate that we would be so popular. Everything was being sold out. And you know, when you go to the NCAA tournament, you get spoiled. Charter planes, police escorts. It's wonderful. And when I came here, I was afraid that I wouldn't have a parking space. But I found as soon as I turned in, indeed, I had a sheriff office escort and a parking space right out front. It's great to be part of the Sweet 16. I want y'all to know how much we appreciate your support. Y'all have been with us from day one, and we have built and we are building a university that is going to be the most responsive institution of higher education to the needs of Southwest Florida.
Amen.
And we have come so far, so fast, because of the commitment of our faculty and our staff, the support of the state of Florida. And I got to tell you, Governor Scott was in Texas with us, and he sat on our side. And Governor Scott and his wife and his daughter, they all sat with me and Joanna, and they were rooting for the Eagles for a long time. But we were so honored to have the governor there to enjoy the game. We were playing Florida, and unfortunately, we were wishing, in retrospect, that Florida played us like they played the next team. We think we would have had a better chance. But to have Governor Scott there with us, cheering on Florida Gulf Coast University and the Eagles in the NCAA tournament was very, very special to us. Another special moment was when someone sent me the video. I don't know if y'all have seen the video. It really empowered me to it empowered me to come down this aisle doing this. And that's because I've seen these folks dance. I knew I had nothing to lose. I so appreciate your willingness to participate in this Eagle Mania. And your enthusiasm, it certainly came through, and we showed it all over Dallas, so just don't go to Dallas. And if you haven't seen the video yet, please try to see it, because at the very end, it referred to Bonita Springs as Dunk City South.
Oh, yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, that was so very accurate. You know, as we move forward as a university, as we grow, and Dr. McIntosh has been intimately involved on our governing board and foundations and things, he understands and knows intimately how we have gotten to where we have. But we're just starting. We are going to grow not only in number of students, but in breadth of programs and in quality of the athletics program. Yeah, Andy Enfield is gone, but the Dunk City spirit is alive and well at Florida Gulf Coast University. And Ken Kavanaugh, our AD, he's on his way to the Final Four. We're already vetting candidates for the next head coach position. And if the press is here, please don't ask me who, because I can't really talk about it, but I want you to know as supporters of FGCU that we're not missing a moment. And you know what? It was a special moment 2 years ago when Ken Kavanaugh and I interviewed several candidates. I got to tell you, those candidates that didn't get the job, they're head coaches. And it's no secret now, one of the coaches that we did not select was the head coach of FIU, and I just learned that he's been named head coach of University of Minnesota. That is a quality of coaches that we can attract at FGCU. But when we interviewed Andy, we knew we had somebody special. And it turned out over his 2 years here that indeed he was special. He was special for our basketball program, our athletics program, for the community, and for FGCU. And we wish Andy and his family nothing but the very best. This guy has already been very successful. He's made history to take a team, a 15-seed team, to the Sweet 16. It's never been done. So he made history here. Our players made history, and we have more history to make. Thank you all for your support. We're going to continue to need it, so stay with us. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you so much for this recognition. And on behalf of the entire university, I accept this proclamation with a great deal of humbleness and honor. So thank you all. Go Eagles.
Go Eagles. Bradshaw, I want to repeat reform.
performance of the... On the way out? I think I was much better doing that. Oh, good.
Good to see you.
Sharon Robichaud.
Thank you, folks. Camera on.
Here we go.
Got that thing back to his science.
What, should he get a police escort out? Nah, he's on his own now, right? Okay, well, that was fun. All right, council, we are to the consent agenda, I believe. Is there, in council, take a close look at it. Is there anything that any member would like to have pulled from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull, I'm sorry, I can't see right on my agenda, the Riverside Cottage. What letter is that? C. Thank you.
Item C?
Yep, just real quick.
Is there anything else, council?
Motion to approve the remainder?
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve the remainder.
Second.
You have a second? Good deal. And could you close that door when you get a chance? All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Martin?
Aye.
Councilman Slakta?
Aye.
Mayor Nelson?
Aye.
Councilman Simmons?
Aye.
Councilwoman Simons?
Aye.
Councilman Longcart?
Aye.
Councilman McIntosh?
Aye.
Okay, Councilwoman
Yeah,
Simmons.
thank you. I just, since we had Nigel Fullick here, I just wanted to ask the Art and Public Places, when they originally did the other color palette that they have there currently, and maybe Councilwoman Martin can say, did they discuss this? Was this brought to the Art and Public Places about this new color palette?
Now, your question is, did we discuss the new color palette with the Art and Public Places?
That is the question. We did it in the past.
Not at the past meeting, no. I think it's on the agenda for the next meeting.
The color palette.
Yes. No, this.
All right,
this
you're saying the
cottages.
the land
No,
development code, did we
No, no,
discuss
no,
with
no,
the?
no, no, no.
No?
No.
Then what are you talking about?
Item C is approved painting of the artist cottages at Riverside Park according to the color palette in the land development code for Old 41 redevelopment overlay.
Right.
And in the past, it had gone forward through the Art and Public Places with the current colors they have on there. I was wondering if it was discussed at the Art and Public Places Board about this approval for painting of the artist cottages.
okay.
And Councilwoman Martin just said, no, it's for the next meeting. So I'd like to ask if we hold off until we get a recommendation from them.
The next Art and Public Places meeting, th're going to
I
discuss it?
believe that was
Okay.
something that
Carl,
Mayor,
go
if I
ahead.
might.
you can.
Just to clarify, we did not go to Art and Public Places in terms of the color palette itself that the council adopted. That went to LPA, because
Right.
it's part of the code, Land Development Code. All right? All I'm trying to do is conceptually get approval tonight as to whether we should set the example and paint the artist cottages in the version of the color palette, and then we can take it to all the appropriate places we need to.
Right, and
That's
at that time, you can take it to the Arts and Public Places and get everybody's comments and what
Correct.
colors they should paint on.
Correct.
Is that what you're referring to?
Mayor, yes, and I was wondering why we're approving it first before we get their recommendation, that's all.
Because we're just getting approval to paint the cottages, and then they will decide which color to paint it. Is that correct? That's what you foresee doing?
Well,
Or make a recommendation?
really, we thought it was most appropriate because this is kind of a radical thing we're suggesting here, is to paint
Really?
these cottages, well, to the new color palette. It's much different than the colors you see now. We wanted to make sure that at least there was conceptual approval on the council's part to go forward with that idea before we took it up the appropriate chain with regards to specific colors and things like that.
Okay, discussion. Anybody? Yes?
Well, the colors that it is now, originally, those colors were presented by the artists that were working out of the cottages themselves at the time. And it does need to be painted and spruced up, so I'm to support that, I'll support this, that let's move it forward and see how it comes out with we should set the example.
Okay, there's a motion to go ahead and forward this. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. So, and your motion is to go ahead and move it through the process. And Carl, the process will be to get comments about what colors and within that palette And then you will bring that back to us and tell us, okay, this is what we've decided to do, and then get the approval from council.
We'd be happy to do that. Yes, sir.
Does that be all right?
Yes, sir.
So we're forwarding it to the Art and Public Places Board within the color palette.
Yep. Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Councilman Slackta.
Aye.
Mayor Nelson.
Aye.
Councilman Simmons.
Aye.
Councilwoman Simons.
That was an aye.
Half-hearted.
I heard it.
Councilman Longcart.
Aye.
Councilman McIntosh.
Still an aye.
Councilwoman Wright.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're also going to take that to the Historic Preservation Board, because that's part of the regular process.
Okay.
They're all, yeah, historic.
All right. Item 8, first reading and public hearing of the following ordinance. Audrey.
Thank you. This is an amendment to this Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Chapter 2, Administration, creating Section 2-3 to permit dogs in food establishments, providing for conflicts of law, severability, codification, Scrivener's errors, inclusion in code, and effective date. This is a first reading. The second reading will be on April 17th, 2013, at 9:30 a.m. I do want to point out, I have reviewed the affidavit of publication, and it is legally sufficient and on a file with the city clerk. Public comment is provided at this time because it does go to the, because it is a land development code ordinance.
Okay. And I'd like just a quick, not an amendment, an explanation. When it says to permit dogs in food establishments, it doesn't mean we're going to permit them in all food establishments.
Correct. It's an optional one for restaurants.
Well, thank you for finishing my sentence. That was so nice.
Sorry.
I beg your pardon? Yeah, it's outdoor seating only. Okay, before we go to public comment, Council, do you have any discussion about this? Go ahead.
I just have one question. How many restaurants have contacted us in reference to doing something like this?
At this point, I know of one, because it's not necessarily just restaurants, it's also hotels, that they're a dog-friendly hotel. So I know of one currently, but I know that Janet Martin, Councilmember Martin, was contacted previously on some other restaurants, and I believe some restaurants may or may not be doing some of this activity right now anyway. A restaurant is not obligated to do so, and it's only if a restaurant has an outdoor seating area.
Fair enough to say a few.
Right.
Okay?
3. Okay, thank you.
At most.
Well,
I don't know. Yes, Steve.
well, I know I was personally contacted and brought this ordinance forward, so I know there's more than just Janet.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, and I've heard from some people. But let me say, I also received an email from one of my constituents saying, I'd never go to a restaurant that had dogs outside. You know, the standards for outdoor seating for a dog area are very stringent, and there are a lot of sanitary conditions that the restaurant has to go through in order to have this. They have to have all sorts of cleaning things and, you know, very, very careful about the health standards. So folks out there, if somebody has a dog and they're outside a restaurant and they're permitted to do that, they're going to have to follow some pretty tough rules. Yep. It's going to be clean.
Okay.
So.
Good. At this time, we'll take public comment on this item only. Anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Robert Shaw from Bonita Springs. I was approached by the health inspector one day. By the way, I manage a Trianon hotel company, as well as I have a little outdoor restaurant called the Lake House Bar and Grill. For years, we've worked with the health inspectors to determine the actual, is it okay, not okay, and we were told yes, it is okay, and we are completely outside, and we've had no problems. However, we did have the health inspector come at 11 in the morning, and we're not even open, and by chance a guest came in early to the restaurant and had a pet, and she told us we could not. And since then, we have not been allowing pets. And I want to tell you, it's very difficult as an independent operator of a business to say goodbye to a 6-top or a 4-top or a party of 5 because they have a pet. And I do agree that it needs to be done responsibly. And we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years with no problem. I've read the ordinance. I believe that it's very clear. I think it's very followable, very easy to follow, and would help our business to be able to allow pets responsibly. And I want to say that responsibly. So I hope you would consider this. I want to thank Councilman McIntosh for hearing me on this. He's my councilman in my neighborhood. And I want to thank the staff for taking the time to put this together, because I know they did a lot of work on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Anyone else this time, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close public comment at this time. Council, would you like to forward this to a second reading?
So move.
So a motion and a second. Any other comment?
I don't know why we didn't do this earlier.
Oh, there we go. Roll call, please.
Mayor Nelson.
Aye.
Councilman Simmons.
Aye.
Councilwoman Simons.
Aye.
Councilman Longcart.
Aye.
Councilman McIntosh.
Aye.
Councilwoman Martin.
Aye.
Councilman Slechta.
Aye.
Okay, now item 9, public hearing considering the adoption of the following zoning resolution.
Thank you, and I'll read the title block into the record. This is a zoning resolution of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a variance request by Alice Albrecht to grant relief from LDC 4-653, Note 4, and LDC 4-654, the minimum lot width and lot area requirements to permit the placement of one mobile home in the AG2 district on land located at 12601 Tower Road, Bonita Springs, Florida, providing for an effective date. This is the one-time hearing. It did go to the zoning board on March 19, 2013, who did find it, who did approve the recommendation of the staff report and recommended that this be approved with conditions. I have reviewed the affidavit of publication. It is legally sufficient. Jackie can provide you with additional case information if you need it.
Good morning. For the record, Jacqueline Genson with Community Development. The reason why the applicant had to come forward and ask for a variance was because mobile homes are permitted by right in the AG2 district if you meet the AG1 standards. And because of when the lot was created, Ms. Albrecht did not have the required lot width and the required lot area. So she did have a hardship. She did meet the hardship tests that are presented in the 5 criteria for variances. Staff recommended approval, zoning board recommended approval. So we are here for your final ruling on this case. So I'm here for questions, and so is the applicant.
Okay. Any questions for Jackie? Yes, go ahead.
Were there no parties of record at the zoning hearing to make comments?
No, sir.
Plus
Just
or
the
minus, for or
applicant.
against?
There's actually, and in the backup, there was letters of support from her neighbors.
Right.
So there was no
Thank you.
objections.
All right. And any questions? Any comments? All right. And we have no parties of record. That's correct, right? Okay, good. At this time, Council, what's your pleasure?
Make the motion.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Simmons.
Aye.
Councilwoman Simons.
Aye.
Councilman Longcart.
Aye.
Councilman McIntosh.
Aye.
Councilwoman Martin. Councilman Slechta.
Aye.
Mayor Nelson.
Aye. Thank you, Jackie. And, okay, item 10, second reading and public hearing of the following ordinances.
Okay, and we'll do the first ordinance. This is an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, creating the Bonita Springs Homeless Shelter Operational Use Permit Ordinance, providing for findings and purpose, requiring a homeless shelter operational use permit, setting forth criteria for an application and operational standards, creating a permit fee, providing for revocation of permit, providing for violation and penalties, providing for severability, providing for conflicts of law, codification, inclusion in code, and Scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date. This is a second reading of the ordinance. I have reviewed the affidavit of publication, and it is legally sufficient and on file with the city clerk. The administrative history is in the green sheet, so I will not repeat that. Special Counsel Beverly Grady will now come up and explain some things regarding the ordinance, followed by John Dolmer.
Thank you very much. Beverly, how are you doing?
I'm fine,
Good.
Mr. Mayor, and good evening to all the council members and Mr. Mayor. Tonight, you will be
Yeah, go ahead and pull the microphone down. There you go.
Tonight, you will be considering 2 ordinances. And to review for you and for the people that are attending here, the guiding principle is the public's health, safety, and welfare whenever you adopt any restrictions. This evening, you will consider an ordinance regarding zoning for social services, and you will consider an operational ordinance for homeless shelters. You've been through a lengthy process with significant public participation in that process, and there has been designed and prepared an ordinance that meets the needs of the homeless population. Over the years, this city has adopted and modeled its comprehensive plan, adopted its regulations, and implemented its codes, and it is recognized as a quality community. These ordinances recognize the impacts from social services and address that. The goal is to clarify the zoning in the zoning ordinance and to receive quality applications plans as you review those plans and the actual operation of any homeless shelter. What is the legal task to sustain the ordinance? There are really three main things. The ordinance must demonstrate a rational or reasonable relationship between the regulation and the legitimate public purpose. Second, the ordinance must be consistent with individual liberties. Third, the ordinance cannot be arbitrary and capricious. It can't be vague. What is rational relationship? An ordinance for the sheltering of the homeless certainly serves a public purpose. There's health, there's sanitation, there's safety. And what is looked at is whether the actual words in the regulation rationally relate to those purposes. That's a matter of drafting as well as policy adoption. Second, consistency with individual liberties. A homeless shelter ordinance can limit individual liberties. If it limited, say, the right to travel from state to state, as you know, the right to travel from state to state without hindrance is considered an individual liberty. The right to freedom of movement within a state, if it were infringed on too greatly, then that can be a violation of individual liberties. And an ordinance cannot be arbitrary or capricious or unreasonable. Looking at the activity, are you treating the people or a group the same regarding an activity? So as you consider the restrictions and the limitations, the test is the rational relationship, the serving of a public purpose, protection of individual liberties, and not being arbitrary capricious. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this time, John, would you please come forward? And council, we are going to work on the shelter ordinance first.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. What I have done is prepared a presentation for you tonight that deals with those issues from the last hearing in which there was either not agreement or there was a request for additional research. And those items are going to include the shelter size, the number of shelters within the city, separation requirements for certain uses, and also some miscellaneous items that Council has asked for additional information that have come up since the last hearing date. The first item dealt with shelter size, and there's been a lot of discussion on this one particular topic, and what your staff has recommended to you and also the LPA has recommended is that based upon the information that we have and the facts that have been given to us both from Lee County and from Collier County, that we believe that a shelter of 30 beds is sufficient, and that would not include any children under 6. So however many children would come with a mother to a facility would not be included in that number. However, going along with this, let's skip ahead a little bit, we recommend that that you not limit the number of shelters within the city. Thought I had the next slide.
John, I'm going to remind you to please speak on your microphone. I want everybody to be able to hear this, okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know it's kind of weird, but go ahead.
The number that we came from, like I said, came from Lee County and Collier County. What you see on this slide has come from 2 different sources of information from Lee County. One source was an interview of all agencies that report to them for the HMIS database. And one of the questions was, are you homeless? And then has follow-up questions that go along to that. And from that, Lee County established that there were 39 individuals that listed the city of Bonita Springs as their last zip code of residence that met the HUD definition of homeless. And in another study, they concluded that in their shelter facilities, there were 9 individuals that used those and were residents in shelters that had used the city of Bonita Springs zip code as their last zip code of residence. And as you can see, there's additional information down there in terms of average stay, both in emergency shelters and in transitional housing. Collier County also provided us information, and what they had said was there were 16 individuals in shelter facilities in Collier County that had used the city of Bonita Springs zip codes as their last zip code of residence, and they did not have information immediately available for the average length of stay. We asked them for the cause of homelessness, and this is what was provided to us by Collier County. As you can see, it's pretty evenly distributed. The reasons they gave us: alcohol abuse, development disability, domestic violence, drug abuse, dually diagnosed, meaning more of one of these apply, mental illness, physical disability, and then there was one category that was blacked out, so I don't know what it was. We were given a request to look at job training because this was discussed at the last hearing, and wanted to know what type of job training was being offered and how many individuals participated in that program. And what we received from Collier County was that they had 34 individuals. Now, these are not from Bonita Springs specifically. These were just the individuals that they had that they were able to provide information for, and this is the type of training they were provided. Lee County does not keep this record, and we were not able to get the same information from them. This is a slide I was looking for earlier. The number of shelter facilities. In the research of other communities that we performed, I did not see any other communities that limited the number of facilities. It was very common for them to limit the number of beds for facilities or to limit the locations in which they could be sited. However, the number of facilities was never capped. And in terms of separating shelter facilities from shelter facilities, this is the information that we were able to find. As you can see, it ranges from 1,300 from one facility to another. Other cities have no separation requirement between each other. It really depends upon the approach that that municipality has taken as to whether they want them close together, whether they want them spread apart, whether they want them close to certain facilities, whether they be government-run social service facilities, or if they just want them close to public transit. There were general trends, but there was no absolute. You could basically see each community address this issue on their own and took their existing conditions and applied the ordinance accordingly. In your packets, and I also have larger maps that I have printed out if we need to see this. Currently, the language in the ordinance that we've proposed, and the LPA's recommended, provides for a 500-foot separation between residentially zoned property, public parks, private parks, schools, daycares, and facilities that serve alcohol. And this is what that map looks like. I apologize. I realize that it's a little bit difficult to read depending on where you're sitting. And if there's any questions, I can answer those. But what you'll see is there are properties along US 41 in the northern portions of the city. There are some areas along Bonita Beach Road and old US 41. And then there is property out east of I-75 that meet this current separation.
Just real briefly, could you describe yellow, blue, what the legend means? I mean,
the blue that's located on there is a school or daycare.
Okay.
And the
yellow areas are the areas that are allowed to apply.
Yes, sir. It doesn't show up as well on the screen. There is a yellowish orange, and if you'll see, actually, if I can get the microphone.
Oh, there it is.
The areas here, 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 and this sporadic orangish yellow are the areas that are outside of the separation requirements. Then the red locations here, 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 here are the buffers around locations that serve alcohol. The green is for public and private parks that we've identified. The darker gray means that the future land use designation does not permit this type of use. And that's all. The lighter gray shows the residential area and the 500 foot around that residential area.
Okay, thank you.
This is the same map, but instead of 500 feet, we have shown what 750 feet from all of these uses would look like. As you can see, there's no additional areas, and those areas where it is permitted have been reduced. At 1,000 feet, what you've done is removed all of the locations outside of the DRGR, except for one property on the east side of US 41 at the very northern boundary of the city. We were also asked to put together a mixture of separations. There was concerns about schools and parks, and what we have done here is provide a little bit of a balancing act. We've reduced the buffering separations from residential to 300 feet. We have increased the buffering separation from schools and parks to 750 feet and kept 500 feet away from alcohol sales. As you can see, this shifts the map a little bit. The areas that were included on the 500-foot map are generally included here, but their locations have shifted a little bit. And we've also increased on this map all the separations for schools, parks to 1,000, and then kept a 500-foot separation for alcohol sales and from residentially zoned property. This is a little bit more closely related to the previous map, but it is more restrictive than the other map that we've prepared. There was also a request about job training and how it will be provided on the site. I've already given you some of the Collier County data as to who has enrolled and what type of training they've had. Just for clarification, the requirement that we currently have in the draft does not require a shelter operator to provide that job training on site. The requirement wasn't so much that they have the facilities there, it's more that they offer these facilities. So whether it is off-site, that they partner with another group, school, trade school, or whether they do them themselves, that is entirely up to the operator to decide, as long as those options are available. And now, this kind of gets into some of the text changes that we're looking at in the ordinance itself. And if you would like to turn with me to section 2B.
Page 3.
That is page 3. It is about in the middle of the page. And this has to do with HMIS data that we would require that a potential shelter collect. And the previous language you can see is in strike through, and the proposed language we would like to modify is in the underlined. So we would replace that language so it would read, forms used by shelter operators will provide data in format specific with HMIS recording processes of Lee County with a specificity as to Bonita Springs. Now that specificity will work through a coordination. The HMIS database operators have been very cooperative in both Lee and Collier County, and we have asked for information, they have provided it. And they have also stated that if we need additional information or something that was a little more specific to the city itself, that they could do it, but they would need time to make sure that that data could be collected as they processed additional applicants. This one I skipped ahead of myself a little bit, so we'll come back to that. That's in chapter 4. Now we'll go to discharge, which is located on page 4. It is item 3. In an effort to clarify our language to make sure what everyone knows what discharge means, we previously had the language in parentheses, leaving shelter residency. However, in an effort to clarify even further, we would propose removing that and adding the language that says, means the resident no longer staying at the shelter and should not be construed as any daily departure from the facility for work. Sections A through C stay the same. And just above this in item 2G, in a clarification of language, all we've done is change that the last portion of the sentence so that applicants in place for physical health and mental health status, so that we're a little more descriptive in the type of evaluation that's going to be performed.
Where is that located?
That is 2G. That is right above number 3 on page 4. The next item is item 10A. That is located on page 6. change that we're proposing here would simply mean that the operator or the person in charge of the facility could also be counted as one of the employees. They're going to have to provide the same qualifications. If they meet those qualifications, they can meet that standard. And that goes through the proposed changes in additional research. So if there are any questions or discussion.
Okay, good. Council, questions? Steve?
Just a quick question. Just for everyone's edification, the yellow on the sheet talks about where they can apply to place a shelter. Would you explain the process one more time, the 2 steps previous to be coming to council?
The language currently requires an applicant to come before you to have a shelter use permit approved. That's regardless of where you are in the city. If you would like to operate a shelter, one of the requirements is that you have this permission from the council. And what we've done with the separation requirements is simply identified those areas in the city that if a facility was to locate, we'd prefer that they look in those areas. If a location is not does not meet those separation requirements, item 18 in the proposed language would allow someone to request a deviation so that this council would look at that location, and just as you would in the rest of Chapter 4 with the deviation process, apply that same standard to a shelter location. So,
okay. Well, may I cut to the chase?
Go right ahead.
You know, we've been threatened with lawsuits, and that doesn't frighten me if we have an ordinance that stands the test. That's okay. But my question is, if a lawsuit's brought forward, is it a requirement that the people have to make an application, go through the process, and be turned down before, or can they simply sue on the face of the ordinance itself?
Beverly, I'd like you to comment upon that because I think that was part of your very well-written memo.
There are 2 times a challenge can be made. Can be made facially, that is, on the language as adopted by the council. It doesn't meet the test that I just articulated, and attack the ordinance with no application if, in fact, the ordinance doesn't meet those 3 tests. If the ordinance meets those tests, then you'll find the challenge may not be there or you will be successful. The second challenge is as applied. If someone came in with an application and they're still going to be looking at those same tests as to how are you applying the ordinance. So the goal certainly is to have the 2 ordinances adopted that would be sustained through any type of facial challenge on just the language in the ordinance. And so, but the answer to your question is yes, it is possible that ordinances can be challenged directly before any application is filed. And also ordinances, a challenge can be filed if an application is there based on the particular facts of the case. Those are the 2 types of challenges that can be filed.
Okay.
Good.
May I continue? Or
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Go right ahead.
You can. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Builder.
I want to, before we really get into a lot of discussion, I want to thank the people in this audience for the time and effort they put into it, especially the Be Safe people who have approached this issue in a very professional manner, and it's a very emotional issue for you folks. I understand that, so thank you for taking that. And I would think that practically everyone in this audience recognizes that we have to have some sort of ordinance. And I think everyone on the dais recognizes that we have to have an ordinance because no one wants to go back to the way we were. I think that's a given. But I think the decision that I've really worked on, worried about, I guess, for the last year is, does it meet the 3 criteria? Is it legal? Does it really serve a need? And is it something that's going to benefit the quality of life in the city? So from the standpoint of legal, I think City Attorney, Beverly Attorney Grady and so on have made it pretty clear that I think from a legal position, it has a legal foundation. Now, I asked City Attorney Vance last meeting to bring forward any case law that would define the extent of buffering and the between shelters and between areas that I consider to be sensitive in the city. And I'm going to paraphrase, but I think her answer was there's no specific definitive case law that would say what the distance has to be between shelter and these other places. The second thing, the data has been very mixed on whether we have a homeless population with a great deal of need, and I think the 30-bed suggestion, the 30-bed piece in the ordinance makes sense for what we've seen in council here. But finally, the issue of quality of life of our students, of our elderly, of our families, and of our homeless population, have those folks been served properly? And I've talked about how this kind of thing would work with the community development, with their attorneys. Any ordinance that's taken on by this council, that's approved by this council, has the opportunity to be changed. So if the need changes from the number of homeless people, then you can change the ordinance. And that's the way an ordinance works, and that's the way it ought to work. So we're trying to put an ordinance in place that has a legal need, a legal definition of need, and so on. But when it comes to buffers, I'm really concerned. I'm not sure that we've done the kinds of things on buffers that satisfy the question of the quality of life. So when we get, if you want to look at your pages, Article 18 is, I think, page 12, and Article 18 of Section 4 talks about deviations, and it's pretty clear that if an applicant can request relief from buffers through the same deviation process that's available in other sections of the land use development. So I mean, it's consistent with what we do in land use, and it gives people an opportunity to say, I don't like the way this works, it doesn't appear to me to be okay. So they have an opportunity to file for a deviation, and that's fair, I believe. But given all that, if you look in, and I'm going to ask you to change one more time, if you go back to page 10 on Section 3, if you look, Section 13, if you look at Section 1, and distance between shelters, I think 1,000 feet is realistic and practical, and I think I believe it meets the facial challenge. Then more importantly, maybe Sections 2 and 3 also ought to be at 1,000 feet. That's the separation that protects schools, protects residences, and protects the city, and protects the homeless, because it gives them an opportunity in this city, as you see from the maps, to have a homeless shelter in areas that are appropriate and can stand up to the challenge. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak this time? Pete, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I'll come to you, Martha.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. As the individual that brought this moratorium less than a year ago, close to a year ago now, as my first act on City Council, I can assure you, after numerous meetings and with staff, with attorneys, with residents of Bonita Springs, I can assure you that this process has not been a farce, despite some comments that I read in today's newspaper. Not a farce at all. It's about our community. It's about what our community needs are. And I think we have done a lot of work, and I think we have done a lot of great work to figure out what it is that we may or may not need in Bonita Springs. And with that, I do have a question. I guess there's nobody, I guess maybe it's for you, Audrey, in the memo that you had sent out yesterday.
Why don't you just ask the question and we'll figure out who we
Okay, there you go.
That's it.
All right, one thing that was a little confusing to me, that I saw a note in section, note 28, 4-3071, says that the previously approved PDs are subject to Article 7, Division 38, and Section 4-3074 goes on to say that approved PDs will need to demonstrate, quote, compliance with this provision unless the approved MCP specified location and capacity of the facility.
Audrey, would you like to explain, please?
Yes. First of all, I just want to explain that's for the next ordinance. That's
Okay.
not what we're dealing with now on operational. If you would like, I can explain now, or we can wait for that answer afterwards on the actual ordinance.
As it pertains to this, does it pertain to this at all?
It doesn't pertain to this
Okay,
at all.
all right. Good. We'll go ahead and save that question for them. Would that be all right?
Excellent.
Good. Thank you very much. Anything else, Pete?
Well, no, and as one where I've seen numbers where it looks like there's somewhere between 9 and 39 individuals from Bonita Springs. I believe our number is on target. In fact, I think our number is even generous if the case be told, truth be told. So I want to thank everybody for the process, and it's been a lot of hard work, but here we are.
Okay, thank you very much. Martha?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say to Councilman McIntosh, I agree with your buffer comment, and I see that the map for those buffers between schools for 1,000 feet makes sense to me. I think that's, our precious treasure. And this community came together around this. It did not fall apart around this ordinance. And this is a very caring community. I know individuals that are in this audience right now who care for other people. One of the reasons we have a low number of homeless people in Bonita Springs is because we're a very caring community. We make sure people don't lose their homes, and that their rent is paid for through BSAO, or they're given an opportunity for housing over at Pueblo Bonito. I mean, we really come together as a community to support our residents. So I'm not surprised that the number is low, but I'm very grateful to our staff for looking at those numbers both in Collier and Lee. And I think Councilman Simmons, it is spot on for that number of 30 for a facility. I know like the city of Cincinnati, they have a cap on, this is a big city, Cincinnati. We're a small one. They have a cap on their facilities of 50. So that's in a major metropolitan area. I think it makes great sense for us, and it is generous to have a facility at 30, more manageable, more attentive to the client. And homeless are clients who have a lot of needs that need to be paid attention to. You don't need a large, well, that's my personal opinion, but I think it's right, and I think it will stand up to the test. I was grateful also to John Dolmer to show us what those buffers were in other cities. In Sarasota, their buffer is 1,300 feet, and that seems to be more than what Councilman McIntosh was saying. It stood up. The 1,300 feet has stood up. I think we could probably have that here. I think because we allow that outlet for deviation, it says, we're willing to look at it. Is it going to work? We're willing to look at it. I also want to thank the folks here in the audience. I want to thank all the parties who've come together to make this work, because we are a caring community. We want to do it right. And I think you all came forward with your excellent ideas to help make this document possible. And I want to thank our staff, because I know that there's been no rock unturned in making sure that we have a cohesive operating permit ordinance that will be worthy of this community, and one that will work. This will make sure that a facility that's built here will be a good facility worthy of the city of Bonita Springs. So thank you, staff, and everybody else concerned.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Steve?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Steve, I also concur with all your comments about the buffer. It really bothers me also to look at the 500 buffer. But again, be safe, everybody. Thank you so much for your participation in this process. It was a very difficult one for all of us, but I think that you've all come together and we've become more of a family because of this. So again, thank you for your professionalism in handling this issue. My question for John is, if I heard you correctly, the 34 clients for Collier County job training, they were not specifically having Collier County address, so we can assume they're transient?
They were those that were in shelter facilities. I do not know where they came from or how long they were at their previous address.
Okay. My question is to, in terms of, let's say we have 39 people that are in Bonita Springs that are considered homeless. If someone flies in from or comes in from Alabama and then wants to be included in the shelter, are we going to allow that to happen, or is it only Bonita Springs homeless?
I think it's going to be, when it's open, it's open. I don't think you can really start segregating where someone is from as to whether they get admittance. Yeah. Your main goal should be that you provide a facility that addresses the need in your local area, and but once it's open, there really isn't much you can do to distinguish residency.
Okay.
Beverly, I'd like you to expound on that a little bit. Just in short, how a person, any of us, all of us, have come here from someplace else, and we've moved here. And whether you're here a day or a week or a month, you can take up residency pretty quick somewhere, can't you not? Can you not? Do you have a microphone? Just a little bit. I want everybody to understand this.
I mean, establishing residency is really a matter of intent. If you look at that's the law. What your intent is how you can establish where you're a resident of. And it is one of the most complex issues when you're speaking of homeless and how to regulate homeless, to be looking at where they are as a resident. And so that's so it really is when they're asked and they say that's their intent, that is probably found to be sufficient. And if I could just point out, one of the things I think to take into account when you're talking about location or distance separation, they're really in a way two different categories. So one category is whether you want to concentrate them or make sure they're not concentrated. And I think the examples that John provided really, except for one, was a distance separation between facilities and just giving examples. And they are just examples, because unless they've had a lawsuit and withstood the challenge, your decision is just as wise as any other community as to what they adopt. But so there's different criteria, and I would listen to your staff as to their recommendation as to distance separation between facilities. And when we did do that research, we did find cases where that's a legitimate basis to have a separation of facilities and not want to concentrate them. Now, when you're looking at the distance between other uses, and that's where I think you need to really listen to what the staff's recommendation is, because that in the end is the basis upon which any defense will be made as far as the distance separation, or really any other challenges that are made. So I think that's important that we make that distinction as to what John has recommended and what he has offered. Thank you.
Good. We will come back to that. Okay, Steve, do you have anything else?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have? Bill?
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to share with you a few things that you may not know. That before I was elected in 08 and 2007, and I don't know if any other council people were afforded this opportunity, but I was approached by some of the nonprofits in the city and how I felt about a social service center. Mm-hmm. And they asked me what I thought, and I said to them very clearly, please, if you want to do something of that magnitude, you must let the people know where you're going to have this place. And they did. They went a couple places, some on city-owned property, and then finally some business properties that the lumberyard would be a good example. This is the most difficult thing because I have obviously not supported any homeless shelter in the city of Bonita Springs. And my question for John Domer is, how many can we have in the city if we pass this? How many shelters can we have?
If you were to approve the legislation as it's currently written, you could have as many shelters as this city council approved.
Well, can you give me specific locations that they are? I mean, I know of 4. Is there more?
You were referring to a map that we had given you previously that showed planned developments that in their schedule of uses had social service group 3, which one of those uses is a shelter use. And what we're looking at in the separation maps that we've given you, it does narrow down those properties as to where we're looking for a potential application to come from. Now, whether you meet those separation requirements, whatever they may be, does not mean you're going to be guaranteed approval. And if you do not meet those separation requirements, it does not mean that you're going to be absolutely denied. What it means is, if whatever your separation requirement is, whether you're looking at distance from residential, parks, schools, etc., if you do not meet it, then an applicant can come before you, file their application, file their application for a shelter use permit, and then this council would decide, does this application meet the standards within your comprehensive plan, and is it consistent and compatible with adjacent uses? So you would be able to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. So when the question is how many could you have, the answer is none to multiple. It depends on the application and what the vote would be when it is presented to the council.
So there could be more than one?
Or there could be none. That's exactly right.
Yeah, right. Okay. Then I'm not done.
Good. Anything else, Bill?
Yes, I'm not finished.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to thank your staff and obviously Audrey's staff and the other attorney, Beverly Grady, for the work that you've done. Interestingly enough, just the other day in the newspaper, and I know this is current information, that there was a house in Golden Gate that was taken apart with about $26,000 worth of damage. And the two people were young men, but they were homeless. That's just the most recent incident that I've saw. And I want you to know that it's very difficult for me to support and have the possibility of someone, a child, a mother with a child, anyone that could be impacted by these type of individuals that come to these places. And we do a wonderful job of helping others in the city of Bonita Springs, from the Assistance Office to the Salvation Army to the United Way. I think we do an excellent job, and all I know is that my history, my work history tells me that once you offer, they will come. And if you look at all the cities in the country, Sarasota being the closest, the problems that they're having. So do we want to ruin the quality of life for people, the few people that need help? I believe we do such a wonderful job. I have never seen, I lived here for 20 years. I have never actually seen anyone that was homeless other than at the interchange. And usually at that, it was a male the few times that I've seen that over the years. So I really think the statistical information that you're getting from the agencies. I looked up the gal that came from Cape Coral. She runs the Homeless Coalition. She receives, or that organization receives, over $2 million a year to help people. The government is giving a lot of money to a lot of nonprofits to just increase what we have as a serious problem. So all I'm saying to you is that, please, I would like to say yes, but I'm not going to. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that you like what Bill said, but I'm going to give you an admonition here. You will not do that again. And if you do that again, I will clear this place. I want to be sure that everybody sitting up this podium, everybody who speaks in the future that comes to that microphone here feels comfortable in this building and feels comfortable to have a dissenting view different than yours. I think as Americans, you want that as well. You want people to have dissenting views, and you want to respect those views. So there will be no applauding, no jeering, no catcalls, none of that. Okay? I think that we can conduct ourselves that way. So everyone's entitled to an outburst there, so that's all right. That was spontaneous. From now on, we're going to conduct ourselves in a business-like manner, okay? Good. Anybody with another question? Janet? No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to get to, I guess, maybe one of the, I find all the other clarifications fine, that you added, but I guess, there's some question about the buffer, and our outside counsel sort of admonished us to take this one, what's already written there for the 500 feet. But let me ask you about this map here that's got the 1,000 foot for schools, 1,000 foot for parks and 500 for alcohol sales and residential. The 500 for alcohol sales and residential is what's already in the ordinance. But the 1,000 for parks and schools, what say you guys about why that's, why wouldn't we want to add that? It seems reasonable to me. And I also would like to say to the folks that just applauded, you know, we could put the strictest, we could all vote like Mr. Lockhart, who is certainly within his rights under the United States Constitution to have whatever view he wants to. But I'm sorry I have to disagree with him, because we are also charged with protecting the city and protecting the people who live in the city. And we also have to care for those people who live in the city. People who are homeless are considered protected people who, I might be homeless someday. In fact, I was homeless one time, you know, and I lived in my city where I grew up for a small period of time. Fortunately, I had a friend who, you know, was kind to me. And anyhow, we could get sued and still get a homeless shelter, you know? So what we want to do is have something that works for our city, works for the residents in our city, whether they have a roof over their head or not. And we don't know I think there's somebody in this room who is homeless. So whatever jeering there is, we don't want to make them feel excluded. I know there is a person here. So anyhow, back to the question about the 1,000-foot schools, 1,000-foot parks, 500 alcohol sales and residential. It looks to me on that map that there are plenty of land that's accommodating for a shelter. And then I do have a question about expansion.
What you have, and I hope I hit the right button, is location up here, the north side of Bonita Springs.
Mm-hmm.
You have some located in the southwest corner of Old 41 and Bonita Beach Road.
Southwest corner?
Southeast.
Yeah, I was
and then
gonna
you
say
have
southwest the
property
dog
that's,
track.
that's located in the DRGR, which comes with its own difficulties in terms of permitting.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there are a few locations on that, but the reason why we have looked at the 500-foot separation was because we felt in our minds that provided the best balance in terms of keeping an intense use, and this use is an intense use, away from lesser intense use so that you don't see an impact on existing residential communities, and also providing locations where a shelter could apply to be located. And in our evaluation, that's where we came up with the 500 feet.
So, just for clarification, if staff's recommendation would be, if you weren't going to do the 500 overall, this would be what you were recommending?
This would be
This is your
the
recommendation.
second alternative, yes,
This
sir.
is the second alternative, the
Yes.
300, 750, 500.
What this does is, while it reduces the separation requirement from residential property, it increases it for schools and parks. So when we have looked at incompatibilities with shelters and school locations, this provides an increased separation between the two.
Okay.
Well,
I'm going to make clarification here. The proposal for 500 overall, you have no problem with.
Yes, sir.
The proposal for this, you really have no problem for. Any professional opinion, you have no problem with.
Yes, sir.
The other ones, maybe not so much.
Yes, sir.
Okay? All right, go ahead. Martha?
Yeah, so I don't understand why another 250, you would remove the 200 feet from residential where it's 500 currently in the language. And, I mean, alcohol sales 500 feet, that makes sense to me. Residential 500 feet. I just think the schools and parks should be 1,000. So, and it seems like plenty, yeah, that one.
We do too.
Let me just try something here. Mayor, could I make a motion to support?
Not yet. We're going to have public comment.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Definitely. Okay. Then that would be my preferred here. But you're saying that all of that land that's out in the DRGR is not sufficient. All the land that's in the north quadrant of the city, and then I see that there's some to the south. There seems to be locations that would be close to what's needed.
There are locations that meet the separation requirements on this map. In our evaluation, we felt that the 500-foot separation was the best alternative.
Well, thank you for sticking to your guns. Okay, the next thing is, you didn't change my mind, but the next thing is about expansion. Expansion of an existing facility. And I'm looking for it. Sorry, I'm not finding it.
It's on
Here we are.
page 10.
Page 10, thank you. Number 14, existing facilities that desire to expand must modify their management and security plan. So while we're putting a cap at 30, we're saying it's not real.
You're putting a cap, explain this process is what it leaves open is that you put the burden of proof on the applicant. So while you put a cap of 30 for the application, somebody can come in and say, well, you know what, we'd like 35, we'd like 40. Or in the future, they can come back and say, you know what, but we want to expand. But you know what, they have to prove the need. There's substantial competent evidence that they have to go through. That way,
I understand, Mayor.
You understand?
May I finish? Yeah, because
I'm sorry, I thought that was your question, but go ahead.
Okay, thanks. The needs of the community will change as we grow. We're currently at 45,000, build-outs at 75,000. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. But my concern here is with what's happening in the other section about distance, and currently we have a cap. I don't know how you can say it in another way to modify, say, over time. You know, that's why the population nexus, where if you have 45,000 people, you know, a certain 0.75 point person per thousand or something made sense to me, because as your population grows, you could have a rational reason to expand a facility.
May I answer this question?
Yeah.
And that is, first of all, expansion of existing facilities. I think the mayor did a good job answering the question, but it was not a complete answer. And that is, City Council, in its conditional approval for the maximum of 30, may decide alternatively that a shelter and the shelter operator may agree in consensus building during the permit process to say 25 or say 20 residents. And then later on, may come in and wish for an expansion to the full 30. Now, there is the deviation language in there also, and that is something that could be requested if the needs meet that and they feel they could ask that deviation.
Yeah, I think we're saying, again, that part of the theory behind this ordinance is to build flexibility for council, so that there is a burden of proof, not on the council's part, but the burden of proof is on the applicant's part. Because when you fix these standards ironclad to where nobody can do anything, that's when you will get the fascia challenge.
And that's correct.
Absolutely. And so, but when you leave there to be a process by in which they can go ahead, and if they prove beyond a shadow of doubt that there's a need and that the council agrees, then that burden of proof is upheld. But that's why that's in there, council. I mean, you know, whether you want it to be in there or not, it's in there for a good reason, a good, rational reason. Okay?
Yeah, later.
Okay, you good? Janet?
I'm not interested in going backwards with the 300 feet to the residential, because we're talking about just as many children playing in the streets.
Janet, could you pull your microphone
where
down?
they
Yeah, there you go.
live. So I'm not interested in that as doing that. So I guess, you know, we're kind of stuck on that 500 plus. I think we need to maybe, given the information you just gave us about the separation from other shelters, I don't want to see one area of town become the saturation point for social services. I'd rather have it diluted out. And definitely, I'm there with the 30 beds plus or minus for the young children. Just, I think that is adequate. I think that if that's addressing what looks like the numbers would say would be a need.
So, and let's reiterate something before we get finished asking questions, go to public comment. You were okay with the 1,000 feet separation between the facilities?
Yes, sir.
And then the other part of this was the 500 parts was the residential schools, parks, that part. So it wasn't 500 overall, it was 1,000 per facility, and then 500 for these other ones, right?
Yes, sir. And the language that's in your draft ordinance says 500 for everything.
Right.
We have discussed at the last meeting the possibility of increasing that to 1,000 between facilities.
Right.
And I don't have necessarily an issue with that.
Okay. All right, I just want to declare that for council and for everyone else. All right, council, you have anything else before we go to public comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just for basic clarification, John, if we all voted the way we know Bill is going to vote tonight, then clarify for me that we have no ordinance.
You have no ordinance.
And the moratorium will then expire.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what will that result in?
Well, you have an active application in for a development order for a facility in Burnwood. And with no operations or maintenance standards, their application has met, I believe, all of our standards for development order review.
So,
that development order will be approved.
and what is that application for?
126 beds, 150 bed.
So by not
facility.
approving the operational ordinance, you've kind of de facto approved that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we go to public comment? Yes, Pete.
Yeah, just a brief comment. I think Council Member Martha Simons brought up some very good points with these distances, and I just Councilwoman Janet Martin did as well. So I think I'm in favor of increasing some of these distances, but we'll get to that.
Oh, bless you. How you doing?
Do you take that down too?
Yeah, you're there. That's you.
Let the record say, reflect the sneeze. Sorry. All right. Okay, Council, we're going to, John, thank you very much. We'll be calling you up later, I am certain. At this time, could we bring the lights up, Bill, please?
Yeah, sure.
I want everybody to be able to find the counter. This time, we're going to take public comment, and if anyone would like to come forward, please come forward. And hopefully you filled out a little card. If you haven't, well, there you go. And you could hand that to Audrey if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Donna Stone. I live at Worthington Country Club, and I represent a number of residents there who are all against a homeless shelter, but we are in favor of a very strong ordinance. And we appreciate the fact that everyone has listened to our concerns and has made this a strong ordinance, but we wish it would go just a little bit farther. Under Section 2, Part G, Intake and Evaluation, the screening is in place for physical and mental status. What happens if someone is found to be a danger mentally, having major psychiatric issues? Will they be removed and transported to a facility that can handle them? It's not specified in that section. Under Section 4, Part B, I want to thank you for making this section stronger by not allowing any abused controlled substance, any abuse of any controlled substance. Section 5, Part A, job training, and again, we've gone around on this before. I really wish that you would change the wording, must provide job training, and change it to access to computer and assistance in job application, so that job training is taken out of that description totally. In Section 9, Part D, the kitchen facility may be used for job training program. However, can we please specify that no outside catering is allowed to protect the Bonita Catering companies? Section 12, Part A, subsection 3, management and security plan, preventing panhandling. Any resident of the facility that is found panhandling, can you please put in that they will be involuntarily discharged from the facility? Not allowed, period. And also in that section under Part 2, that meeting at least twice a year, this really needs to be either monthly or quarterly for community grievances to be dealt with in a timely manner. Twice a year is insufficient. Section 13, we've been talking a lot about the separation, and I am totally in favor of the 1,000-foot buffer. I don't think it should be anything less. Section 15, Part C, inspections and violations. As I mentioned before, 180 days to hold a meeting on a violation is really not correct in any way. It's too long for citizens and the city to get grievances addressed, and it should be no longer than 60 days. Thank you for all your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else now? Please come forward. And if you would, if we do have a lot of speakers, I have a pretty good idea we do. If you would want to queue up here a little bit and have the next speaker come up and be ready, that would be great. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Gallagher from Cedar Creek. We've had a long roller coaster ride on this shelter issue, to say the least. With these ordinances, I hope that we are finally coming to a reasonable conclusion. And if we have a shelter, it will be commensurate with the size of Bonita's homeless population and not with the wishes of a business outside of our city and county. Here's just a reminder of why we are regulating shelters. First, there was no established need for a large shelter in Bonita. Nevertheless, our city accepted a shelter development order that included 260 beds originally, even though there were only 36 homeless documented in Bonita at that time. This was for a property near schools, daycare, residences, and the Art League. Second, the establishment of large unregulated shelters in other communities has resulted in problems. A little research in other places reveals that they usually raise the crime rate within several miles and often contribute to dropping property values and increased taxes. Be Safe has hard data and examples to support these claims, and it has shared this information with the City Council. This ordinance should minimize problems by keeping the shelter size based on our community's need and regulated for the good of the shelter residents and the community. Third, the City of Bonita Springs' vision statement is for a walkable, pedestrian-friendly city with outstanding parks and recreational facilities for its residents. Implied here is that the community be safe for all ages to enjoy. The goals, objectives, and policies section says land should be consistent with the natural and built-up environment and with the existing and developing growth patterns. An unregulated shelter is not in keeping with the current environment and can seriously harm the vision. After reiterating why we are considering shelter ordinances, I would like to weigh in on 2 points that are most important in my opinion because a wrong decision by the council could cause a lot of pain to Bonita residents. First is the distance between the shelter property line and other social services, daycare, schools, and so on. I urge the council to require a distance of 1,000, not 500 feet. This helps prevent clustering of social services in one area. It's also an issue of fairness and adds an element of safety for the children and property owners. Second is the number of beds, because we can justify 30 beds based on Bonita's homeless count of 36 and a comparison with Fort Myers homeless versus their population. I ask that you limit beds for Bonita Springs to 30 for the city, not per shelter. Remember, this number is based on a city number, a citywide number, not per shelter. And just because this has not been done before, limiting it by city, doesn't necessarily mean it's illegal when it can be justified by our own numbers. In conclusion, don't let the threat of a lawsuit affect your decision. Have the courage to do what's right for the majority. Please vote yes on both ordinances, including the 2 changes above. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For all your work.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
For all your work.
Oh.
And everybody else's work on the issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Nelson, City Council members, and city officials. When this brouhaha first began, the major uproar was about the proposed shelter being built next to the charter school and daycare centers. That still is my #1 concern. In writing this ordinance, there have been a few compromises, but for the most part, I believe it is sound. The occupancy of 30 is fair and will take care of our own. That being said, with a setback of only 500 feet from a concentration of children, it's not putting our most precious resource first. As you know from all the research, a homeless shelter of any size will draw an element that would be rejected from residing in that shelter. And I know that this ordinance has to be able to stand in case of litigation, but please change the setback from schools, daycares, etc. to be at least 1,000 feet and prevent the concentration of Group 4 facilities in any one area. This ordinance needs to be passed to protect our city and keep that small town charm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Council, I'm Ann Murray. I live in Bonita Springs. I have a question. I'm not real good on distances, but that property, Burnwood, is 10 acres. And if you're going to let homeless shelters of 30 in there, is there anything in the ordinance that's going to say you can't have like 4 on that property? I don't know how many would fit, but that's going to be part of that setback, isn't it? 1,000 feet between facilities, or is it going to be 300? How many will actually fit there? And is there a prohibition about putting more than one shelter on that property?
Okay, and we'll have the question answered. I've got it written down, and we'll answer your question for you. Thank you. What was your first name?
Anna Marie.
Anna Marie. We'll answer that for you. Thank you very much. Hello.
Hi, I'm Deborah McLean, and I'm the publisher of the Banana Peel, and I am the homeless person that Martha's talking about. I find that we are breaking ground once again here in Bonita. I was on the incorporation committee, and our city charter is what saves us from overdevelopment, and it saves us in many ways. We have such a low property tax rate. We are in a wonderful place to live. I too am concerned about the distances. I believe it should be 1,000, and we should have one homeless shelter for the number of people as determined by all this hard documentation provided by the citizens, not by the city. We should be brave enough in this information to break ground in this ordinance and say one shelter. And then in the future, when you are all out of office and there are new people, the formula should be reviewed. And if we have more homeless people, then one more shelter or the existing shelter might expand. But Anne Murray brings a good point to the forefront. There are 4 planned developments that would allow shelters. Those 4 could build a 30-person shelter, and then 1,000 feet away, figure out how to do it in a cost-effective way, build another pod and another pod and another pod. So I think you should go back to the numbers, what's determining the number of homeless people. And I will say they're not nice. You don't want them in town. And I know that's hard for you to understand, but I rub elbows with them. They are not nice. So one homeless shelter total for 30 people. And that should stand the test of the law based on need. Bye.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. For the record, Charles Maurer, President of Development Associates and the agent for the developer of the Burnwood Business Park and Burnwood Park of Commerce. I'm here to discuss 2 issues on the operational ordinance, and that will be followed by my fine attorney, Neil Montgomery, who will, I'm sure, be much more long-winded than myself. First issue is what I don't believe has been addressed in your operational ordinance or discussed is economic feasibility. This ordinance, as it's put together, creates for a developer or an operator, it's impossible. Let's use your land development code, 30 beds. The ratio, conversion ratio for an ACLF, adult congregate living facility, that equates to 7.5 units. Utilizing the same conversion, which is appropriate, 7.5 hotel rooms. If you're going to write an operational ordinance that's going to withstand a legal test, you can't have a 7.5 room congregate living facility or a 7.5 room hotel that has to provide full-time medical, full-time social, housekeeping, food, security, and the like. Nor can you have a 7.5 room hotel that provides concierge service, free breakfast, a spa, a gym, and Wi-Fi. I think you have to check yourself
when you take a look at the 30-bed limit and the economic feasibility, and I bring that to you as with my developer's hat. The second issue I'd like to discuss and bring to your attention is this site distance separation. I'll talk about it more when we get to the use changes you're suggesting. The Burnwood Park of Commerce, as an example, and I've been told by staff, I'm not quite sure if it's correct, but I'll rely on them. There may be a small portion of that property that would meet the 500-foot site separation from other uses. Assuming they're correct, and I can't read the map, I'm way too old to look at those little things without a microscope. A 5-acre site, which is half the size of our current development order that's in process, approximately, utilizing a dimension that's a square, 450 feet by, or 460 feet by 475 feet. A 500-foot separation for the uses as a buffer would impact 67 acres of that 80-acre site. If you use the 1,000-foot separation, the way the crow flies, the way your ordinance is being proposed, it's going to impact 133 acres around that 5-acre site. And that's just economically infeasible. If you're going to require these facilities to be in a planned development and built properly by a developer, you cannot take away from that developer the restricted uses in 67 acres or 133 acres. Finally, and at some juncture I'd like the City Council to address this, there's been no discussion on the process other than off-the-record discussion. What is the process going to be? Are you going to require an operational plan be approved by City Council before a development order or zoning is approved? And if that's the case, how do you do that? How do you put together an operational plan the way you've drafted it when you have no idea where you're going to put it, you have no idea what your zoning is going to be, and you have no idea what your development order is going to look like? The zoning and the development order has got to come first with a footprint on a site before this operational plan can even be put together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Gregory Corey. I live in Cedar Creek. As you know, I'm one of the founding members of Be Safe Bonita, and it's hard to believe it's been a year since we got going on all this. I have to agree with Mr. Maurer. I would like to know the process of how the development order would be approved. Is it going to be something where they submit their development order and someone looks at the map and gets their measure tape out and says 1,000 feet, and they're trying to put it within, too close that it immediately gets rejected? Or is it something that they take it in and then it goes to council? So I'd like to get some clarification on that. I'd also like to say I like things easy. I'd like to see 1,000 feet from schools, from residential areas, and from, what was the other, parks. Alcohol, let's leave it at 500. That doesn't really matter to me. I'm looking to protect the children. One of the original plans of Be Safe Bonita, it says right here on our stickers, and I'll peel it off so I can read it without my glasses. Protecting children and property values by ensuring the proper and safe use of land near schools and residential areas. That's what we've been about from day one, protecting the children. Property values, of course, is another issue, but it's mainly about protecting the children, and that's why I see the 1,000-foot rule needs to be applied, especially to schools and residential areas. They're out in the street, they're coming to and from school, you need to have that ability. I would also like to see, if I didn't mention it, one shelter per land parcel. So even if you have a large parcel of land that's X number of acres, it could easily fit in multiple shelters 1,000 feet apart. It should be one shelter per that parcel of land. It keeps it simple and lets people know what the process is. Mr. Maurer mentioned that it's hard to build a facility and support it. That may be true, but there's lots of businesses out there that do support. There are bed and breakfasts that have only a few beds, and they manage to survive and make a living. And so if it can be done, it can be done. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Fred Forbes, Bonita Springs.
in the discussions and a lot of public input, one of the big concerns was concentration of similar facilities very close together. I am glad that Councilman McIntosh, Simmons, Simons, a number of you brought that up. To me, that's probably as important, if not more important, than is it 500 or 1,000 feet from the residential areas. Let me say this, the various sites that are currently got planned developments that could possibly have a homeless shelter, there's at least 4 of them, and they're miles apart. So I think that having 1,000-foot separation is really minimal to what you could have. In fact, if you have 1,000 feet, you could conceivably, on one of the larger tracts, have more than one 30-bed shelter. The one thing that hasn't been spoken about, and it's a concern that I have, and that is that besides homeless shelters, there are other types of shelter for different situations, and I don't think you want to have that 1,000-foot rule only apply to homeless shelters. There's a lot of wisdom sitting on the table. There's a lot of wisdom that's worked on this. There's diverse opinions. I want to compliment everybody that's worked on this to date. It's been very professional. This is an unusual thing. It's probably one of the most important things Bonita Springs will do. And I don't envy you and your decisions, but I think you're all doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. For the record, Neil Montgomery. I heard you all say that one of the things that you really wanted to do was to be able to accommodate the homeless in the city. And I appreciate the map that you have, but one of the things that map doesn't show you is where can I really put that use under the comprehensive plan. It's nice to show that large area of yellow to the east, but it's DRGR, so you can't really put it there. Some of that industrial development, you can't put it there. So it'd be nice if you had a map that actually overlaid where I can put those uses under the comp plan with where I can presumably put them under this ordinance, because I think you're going to find very few, if any, undeveloped sites where you can actually locate one. Secondly, I want to follow up on what Mr. Maurer said, and I'd like you, if you would, to look at Section 12. It's on page 7. And remembering, well, and I guess look at page 8. Remembering what Ms. Grady said about you can't have an ordinance that's arbitrary or vague. You have to put a reasonable amount of notice of what's required. Mr. Maurer alluded to the plan you have to get approved before you can even come in. And you look at condition 4, it says, the facility shall implement other conditions by City Council following consultation with city departments and neighborhood groups necessary to ensure that management and/or residents maintain the quiet, safety, and cleanliness of the premises and the vicinity. I would like one of you to tell me what those conditions are, or you can somehow anticipate what they are. As that's written, that's a ticket for you to say no to anything. You can put enough conditions on there to make the neighborhood happy that you'll never get one approved. So I think that provision in and of itself is incredibly vague. No reasonable man knows what that means. And you also, I mean, the fact that you have to do all these things before you get zoned, really? I don't know what you're going to approve. I don't know what size you're going to approve. I don't know what buffers you're going to approve, if any. So how can I tell you how I'm going to operate something that you haven't even yet told me what it's going to be? That's an impossibility. So you've created an impossible situation. So it's nice to say you're going to accommodate the homeless, but you haven't really, because you've written an ordinance that's you can't follow. And I don't know if you can explain to me what it is those things are going to do before you actually approve it. And I do appreciate the changes that John shared with you, because I think they do make it clearer. But I still think there are things in there that are not defined, and what the memo says that you got was, well, you'll know what those things are when you go to do your plan. That's not how it works. I don't figure out that's like the healthcare bill. We'll all know what it means after we read it. It's a little bit like that. We have to know before we do the plan what the ordinance means. So those things actually need to be clarified. And I think one of the things that I don't want you to lose sight of is what Mr. Dulmer just said. You have a piece of property, and while you didn't really pay attention seemingly to the stack of information that I provided that shows the property is vested, and you have a deal that's ready to issue, and nobody's talked about the impact of what you're doing on the rights of the property owner, and it appears as though you're going to take them away. And that's a concern to me, and that's a concern to my client. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Bill, you can go ahead and put the lights back up if you would, please. I don't want anybody to trip and fall.
Good evening. My name is Ben Hershenson, a member of Be Safe and a resident of the Fairwinds subdivision within a couple of miles of this proposed site that we've all been talking about. I like the 1,000-foot rule. It's simple, and I'm from New England originally, so keeps me pretty much easy to remember 1,000 foot. I really think that's appropriate, and hope that the council will consider that change. I want to commend the members of the organization I'm part of, but in addition to that, the hard work of the LPA and certainly the city staff. I remember a year ago when this all started, the letters to the editor were something else. Well, it was clear that anybody with a common sense and half-baked intelligence knows you don't win these debates in newspapers or in a 30-second soundbite on some TV station. You win it by working together, by listening, coming together, people from all sides, all the stakeholders, and you discuss. And I think these proposed ordinances, I think, are excellent. They're not perfect, but I think, for me personally, as a person who initially was opposed, I'm not opposed anymore. I heard Councilor Simons make an interesting comment, and I agree, very eloquently, said we take care of our own, and we do. I hear the comments about this may not be economically feasible. Well, when this whole thing started, I heard that about that whole Burnwood property. You can just about put anything there. So a homeless shelter is just one item out of a potential whole long laundry list of potentials for that property. I'm not too sure that that's an issue the council should be concerned about. It's certainly not depriving any developer from developing that whole area with many other uses, and this is just one small little segment of a potential use for that property. So I think that's a red herring. I do want to say that the motivating force on the part of the council should always be what is best for the citizens. And I look forward and I hope the council will support and vote for these ordinances as they are presented. I think they're not perfect, but they're excellent considering where we were about a year ago. And for any of those who say we don't care, Bonita Springs does care. We will take care of those in need in our city. We don't have to become a megalopolis for the whole Southwest Florida part of this state, or indeed the entire state. So again, please pass this ordinance as it is presented to you, and the possibility of 1,000 foot also sounds better to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Evening, Dick Durfone from Highland Woods. I've spoken to you a few times before council. A lot has been mentioned this evening. I'm not going to go and say everything that's been already, repeat everything that's already been said. I think it's critical that we look at the 1,000 feet separation. And this is a very controversial issue for our city. I think it's critical that if there is a shelter built, and we have one shelter, then there shouldn't be an opportunity to add more shelters to it. Just developing or building one shelter has created a lot of havoc in this community. Why would we create the opportunity to have more than one in our town? I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, good evening, Rick Steinmeier. 1,000 feet sounds good. What if we want to build a school and there's a homeless shelter there? I guess we can't build a school there then, huh? Guess we go for a variance on that. Just a thought, all right? Make it 2,000 and we won't have any schools. Inspectors, All shelters are subject to inspection by state or local agencies carried out by inspectors authorized by law to see whether they are following housing, sanitation, and food service codes. Who are these people? You know, are they going to enforce this ordinance? Who are these inspectors, and when are they going to inspect? I think it ought to be clarified a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else this time?
Good evening. How are you? My name is Fred Schofer. I live in Lee County Homeless Coalition, and I'm here to basically observe and understand and be a part of it, definitely be a part of it. First of all, I want to thank you for the changes. 2B, 3, 2G, and 2A all look like good changes, and I recommend you, I thank you for doing that. I do have to look to our attorney and say I please request the assurance that no homeless person's civil rights will be violated by this ordinance. That is my main concern. They are citizens, whether we like them or not. They are citizens of our state, our city, and our country, and we need to make sure that their civil rights are preserved. A comment was made about the coalition receiving $2 million. We are the receiving agency for that. However, most of that money was spent by Lee County government and by Salvation Army and various agencies who request those grants. I would encourage the city of Bonita to put in for a part of that and be a part of that process and share some of that money if we go hopefully get that again. It's set up by statute to go through the coalitions as opposed to going directly to the government, and I'm sure you're aware of that as well. As far as the zoning and things, I visited probably in the last 8 years 12 different shelters in different communities from Key West to California. And one of the things I've noticed is the utilization of industrial property. Because industrial property isn't generally near schools, industrial property is generally not due to other places. It does provide a little bit of separation, as you call it. The best one I can think of is Key West. The Key West shelter is located directly across the street from the jail. And the jail people come over and do the cleaning as part of their community service that they have to do. So it is a marriage that could be worked out, and I would urge you to please look at industrial property as a possibility. The alcohol thing, I was kind of interested in that, why it came out. I know that people assume most homeless people are alcoholics, but I didn't know if that was the basis of it all. But I assume that if a shelter is granted, then you will not be issuing any business permits to sell alcohol near that shelter adversely as well. So that, I would like to make sure of that. And last but not anything, is there, to your best of knowledge, do you know of, is there any other city, I've been on the internet for the last 2 days, that has passed an ordinance of this magnitude with regards to shelters? Are you aware of any other cities? Did you get your template from other cities, or, and I'm not familiar, and I just want to ask that question. And last but not least, we want to be involved. The Lee County Homeless Coalition does include Bonita Springs, believe it or not. I'm down here generally at least once a month doing outreach. I am liaison with the law enforcement. I stop in and see law enforcement, and we talk to each other about the homeless situation, and my little thing's running out. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate what you're doing, but we're here to help. The coalition will be a partner with you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more speakers? Please come forward. Seeing none, council, let's answer a few of these questions here. We'll start with Anna Marie's question. Audrey, you want to give that a shot? Her question, I believe, is for example, the Burnwood area. Let's just use that as an example. If the Burnwood area could have one, and there were other sites within that 1,000, but there has to still be the separation between the two, or it's considered an expansion. In other words, I think that's kind of the question.
Right, and the way that the ordinance is drafted, it's 1,000 feet between facilities or similar uses. Her question was how many can fit on that parcel, and I think she was specific, not as to the 110 acres of Burnwood, which under Mr. Maurer's example, you could at least put two too, assuming they're all in the yellow, which they're not. So, I mean, that's kind of hard. But we do not have a requirement saying a planned development can only have one shelter. You know, so I mean, it is geometrically possible. I'll let him handle the math issues.
Go ahead, John.
If it's on the same parcel, it's going to be considered the same shelter.
Yeah.
If it's on a separate parcel, it's going to be considered a separate shelter and under whatever standards this council puts for a separation requirement between the two.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Anna Marie, that help you? Yes?
Yes, but what if they divide the parcel up? Sell part of it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe it's a planned development, then they would have to come for some kind of a variance.
Deviation, because if this council adopts a separation requirement between like facilities, they would have to have your approval to locate closer to that.
But to be close, you have to have deviation, even if it's separate properties.
Right, and may I just add to that, and that's when you do a planned development, we have so many planned developments that separate and subdivide, and that's normal, and it's not done based on ownership, it's done based on that planned development that's out there as far as their approvals.
Okay, for the next thing, process. There's been questions, I've even asked some questions about process. Can you kind of give us a walkthrough on this process, or is this something that you have thought about? Somebody goes around and they look and they think first, well, I've got something in the yellow part of the property here. How do you see that unfolding?
I have thought about it to a certain extent, but so much depends upon what is actually adopted that I have not gone too far. A good point was raised that maybe the operation or the shelter use permit should come after the zoning and development order. And to be perfectly honest, I have no problem with making that change. It does make sense. It does allow a potential operator to know what can be approved so that they can continue becoming more specific as the processes continue. As opposed to being very specific in your shelter use permit and then going back and then doing zoning and then development orders.
Well, shouldn't we use something, let's use a bar, for instance, right? There are separation distances for bars, right? From
Yes, sir.
certain facilities. How do they do it for that? They have to get an operational use or something like that. A consumption on premises, they have to be a certain distance away. So they have to do that calculation beforehand?
They would do that whenever you are within, if you would like outdoor service within 500 feet of a residence, you're exactly right. You would have to come in for your special exception approval, and that would be done showing exactly where the service was going to be requested and what you're going to be doing to provide that service. And then from there, you could either construct whatever improvements need to be made, or if the improvements are there, begin service.
Well, I mean, I do think that that's something that will have to be worked out soon. There will have to be an actual process by in which somebody doesn't get the cart before the horse somehow. I mean, I do agree that regardless, I mean, if you're going to do this, you can't create kind of an impossible situation where somebody doesn't know what to do first. With any of this, it needs to be pretty clear cut on what they need to do.
And I think that if you look on page 7, item 12A, this kind of gets down to the point. And it's the second sentence that reads, prior to approval of the special exception or plan development or this permit, the operator, which was changed to permit holder of the facility, shall provide to the city a management and security plan form substance acceptable to the city, addressing at a minimum the following, and then it goes into the required information. If that was changed so that the plan was provided simultaneous or immediately following zoning approval.
In conjunction with?
Yes, sir. That would make a little more sense.
Okay. All right.
Ben?
All right. Yes. Question?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, that sentence. Prior to approval, the special exception or plan development or this permit, the permit holder, to approve it, they don't have a permit yet. Okay, so it could be the applicant, the owner, the
applicant,
proposer for the facility. I'm not quite sure, but they don't have a permit yet, so.
That's fine. I can go.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's similar, Mayor, similar to a special exception process
Sure.
then, right?
Sure. Beverly or Audrey, do you have a comment about the process?
What it could say is prior to development order. Then that way, you know, I would anticipate any of your zoning for special exception or for plan development would contain some detailed conditions requiring compliance with this operational ordinance. But to actually obtain the permit, it could say prior to approval of the development order. That at that point, you're in there with the detailed plan for a development order, and prior to that approval, then you would provide all of this information.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and while you're here, just covering these questions. There was someone, I think Neil pointed out that some of the yellow areas would actually require comprehensive plan amendments. That's true, right?
Yes, sir, it could, in some of those
Yeah.
areas.
Some of those areas may do that. Some of those areas may allow it, you know, to be done, but there'll still be a plan development, no matter where it goes, right?
Yes, sir, and what was outlined, she's exactly right. The map is very good for what it is, but it is what it is. What we did was we looked at the uses that the residents and public input had said we would like to provide a separation between, and we placed that on a map. What you also have to consider is that the measurement for separation will be from the edge of the building to the property line of the buffered use. And without a specific plan, well, I know that we have one development order that's been filed, but when you're looking at preparing a map without specific plans, you cannot provide that down to a very accurate level. You can get a very good idea of areas that would be permitted or meet that separation
And it's not
requirement.
impossible to get in the DRGR social services of type. We have something out there, a group home. I think that's what is
Yeah.
considered.
Yes, sir.
Out of an area right now. So, but it would
Well-
it would require you to get a comprehensive plan amendment.
It could, and if the council remembers that you have a portion of the DRGR that is currently under study.
Yeah.
And before the end of the year, the situation could be radically different in that area.
That's true. That's true. Okay.
not.
The one other thing here. By the way, the one gentleman, and I appreciate his coming up here from the Homeless Coalition. Yes, we have looked at other templates from other communities. Other communities have, there's all kinds of stuff out there. The first one we had modeled from several of them, and it was way more restrictive than this. As a matter of fact, because it was a compilation of everybody's, I think, that Audrey came up with. So just to answer that question. And I think that's it for the questions for this time. Council, do you have anything else? Yes?
Well, Ms. Montgomery did bring up a question about 4 on page 8, item 4 under the Good Neighbor Plan. And I think she makes a valid point about, well, just what exactly could these conditions be? So could we put an example, lighting, you know, what could those conditions be, lady attorneys that are down there, so that we could give an example of what they could expect? Because she said, I don't know what I could expect if I'm meeting with the neighbors and they tell me everybody's got to wear top hats, or, you know what I mean? So that's page 8 on the very top, number 4. The facility shall implement other conditions. And I don't know if we want to give an example what those other conditions, you know, when we give conditions on driveways, or, you know, when we have a zoning.
Can I, let me help out here just a little bit, and I'll get you started. How about that? I think it's kind of like the process that we go into with a variance process.
Right.
A lot of times someone will come up to a variance if it isn't just a pure, I want a variance, but if it's a planned development, we can always have the ability to add all kinds of conditions to it. Look, because to mitigate certain circumstances specifically, do we not? Right. And so it's kind of similar to that language there. When somebody comes in for this process, that there can be things that are site specific that we can require them to do. And it's hard to give examples because you can't imagine everything, I don't think. Go ahead.
Right.
Well, I'm going with that analogy. A reasonable condition that council does often is change buffers. And it might be something in conjunction with the neighbors. They might have a certain buffer criteria that makes sense. No different than when Mr. Maurer came in as a citizen. he had concerns about forced resources across the street, and him and Ms. Montgomery argued for enhanced buffer, and council obliged. So that's very typical for conditions to come in, for an applicant or a citizen to come in, and for city council to consider. We could put in the word reasonable conditions, so it's other reasonable conditions, because that is a standard, and if a applicant thinks the conditions are unreasonable, that would be something they could challenge. If you think that,
Yeah.
if there's a standard there.
An unreasonable condition they could challenge anyway,
Mhm.
I think, right?
It's a redundancy, but you could put it in.
Okay. I have no problem with that.
I have
but-
no problem with that. If
Yeah.
that
I was going to say,
answers
you
the
have
lady's
limits to the
question.
abilities or
Right,
areas you
you
can
know.
condition and how you do it now.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether the language has changed or not,
Yeah, you-
your
you-
authority does not.
Yeah, it doesn't cover everything, does it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank goodness. Council, anything else? Anything else? Any
Yes,
other questions or comments
yes,
before we start
question.
to cut to the chase?
Mayor,
here?
could you clarify for me, if we wanted to move forward with this approval tonight, can we do it without arriving at a decision on the buffer?
On the buffer?
On the 1,000? or-
On the distance?
Yes.
I think that's probably at the guts of the whole thing. I think that there, I think that there needs to be, this is just my opinion. Tonight, I think that we need to get this off the table. There's been enough time and enough resources, and we just need to go ahead and get on with it. We need to go ahead and pick a number that we think that is sustainable, that is reasonable, that will allow something to happen, like I think we're pretty much in agreement here. And you know what? And then live with the consequences so far as whether there's a challenge or not. And I think that's the best thing to do here.
Well, in that support, I'll make the motion that we change Section 4, Item 13 to read 1,000 feet. That would encompass buildings of similar uses, residential areas, schools, daycare centers, parks, playgrounds, etc.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
And I just want to make sure, residential?
Yeah, it's
On that 1,000, yes.
number
Okay.
2.
Wonderful. Great.
Okay, I'd like to ask one question of staff about that, about the distances. And it's been a point that Audrey and we've had this discussion many times that had nothing to do with this. It was just, well, actually it did at the beginning of this whole process, which is the reciprocal nature of zoning. Take, for instance, you put in an industrial development, and then everything's fine because there's nothing near it, and then someone builds a residential community right next to it. Well, nobody thinks anything about, well, the residential community will build it until people start moving in there. And then people start moving in, and then all of a sudden they're shocked because there's an industrial development next door to them. How about the reciprocal nature of this? I mean, what happens when you put the 1,000-foot buffer away from a school, as Rick said, does that prohibit? The reciprocal nature doesn't go both ways. Once it's existing, can someone build a school within 500 feet away from it, and then when their expansion comes for that thing, they say, no, you can't do it because we're too close to you.
Right, and that's actually what happened here. You have an industrial park, and then afterwards, planned developments came forward that were residential in nature, and they came to the nuisance. If an industrial park is a nuisance, and I don't know if it is or isn't not, but we'll just say the term in legalese is coming to the nuisance.
I get you.
And same thing here. If a school decides to be 10 feet away from the shelter could challenge it, but I don't know if anybody else would have standing. I mean, they could decide that they want to be closer, so they have the right to do so. So it would not, usually.
Same with other uses.
Correct. The other specified uses here, they could come closer to the shelter after the shelter was established, and knowing that it was established if they so desired, and not come and complain about the shelter because they came to the nuisance. Now, with that being said, usually property owners don't allow certain uses because it does restrict their abilities.
Okay, so for clarity for councils, the door swings one way there, so to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out once again, as I did a while back, for anybody that thinks these distances might be too restrictive, generously, these distances are a 6-minute walk, a 4-minute jog, or a 4-minute jog, or a 2-minute sprint. These are not great distances. These are not far distances, and I'll be voting in favor of the motion.
Okay, any other comments?
Point of
Yes.
clarification. I just
Yes.
want to make sure, because Councilman McIntosh, you kind of spoke fast, and I just want to make sure I got the right ones.
Let me
Is-
speak to your speed. 1,000 feet
Mhm.
for number one, distance between, number two, residences, number three, schools, daycare centers, parks, playgrounds, etc.
Now, what about alcoholic beverages? Is that, all-
I said et cetera. Yes, that's in number
okay,
three.
so it's 1,000 feet across the board?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking to find out.
Okay.
Okay. And, okay. One comment before we take a vote here. I want to let everybody know, there's been a lot of comments that they, well, you've done a lot, what you've done because council, and you haven't done some things because you're afraid of getting sued. That's not true. What we've done, I think that there's been a lot of respect up there for balance, and there's a balance that we have to always do, which is between the fairness between one person and another, one neighbor and another, one citizen and another. There's always a respect for law here that is deep in our hearts. You know, we have an oath to the charter, but we also have an oath to the Constitution. And it's like the gentleman says, please, please, please don't take away anyone's civil rights. They're your brothers and sisters. I mean, they may be in trouble, they may be alcoholics, they may be whatever, but I'm sure you don't want to take away anybody's civil rights. None of us want to do that. And all of us who have bumper stickers on our cars that say, respect and protect the Constitution, I think you mean that, don't you? You do. And so that's the other thing that drives us along here. The lawsuit part of it, that's fine. We want to try to do what's right. And it's really difficult to do what's right for everybody and to balance that. And that's what you've seen happen here in this community. We will find out with how successful we were in that process sooner or later. Staff, do you have any other comment before we continue? Beverly, would you like to make a comment before you
No,
continue?
I only wanted to, I want to read what that motion would be, because it would change 13 location of shelter. Homeless shelters may not be located closer than the following, measured on a straight line from : 1, 1,000 feet from any building containing a similar use, or 2, 1,000 feet from any existing residential use under separate ownership or planned residential use that has an existing development order, or 3, 1,000 feet from any school, non-commercial daycare center, child park or playground, or an establishment primarily engaged in the sale of alcoholic beverages for on or off-site consumption.
That was the motion. If the council wants to change the alcoholic beverage piece, that's up to them.
Yeah, somehow I don't think you're going to get a challenge on that one.
Okay.
But go ahead, John.
That's fine. I just had one more item when we had talked about the process and changing the shelter use permit timing, or the management security plan till after zoning.
Yeah, Beverly, you had some language you had proposed there.
Right, and that was on page 7, item 12, second sentence. Clarify, prior to the approval of the development order, the applicant for the facility shall provide to the city a management and security plan in form and substance acceptable to the city, addressing at the minimum the following.
Okay. All right. Council, everybody clear with the changes? Staff, you all good?
Can I just make sure, go over for the record, the other changes that were made into this ordinance?
Absolutely.
And they're less controversial, so it should be relatively quick.
That wouldn't be hard.
First of all, anything with the yellow that was highlighted, those changes will be incorporated. The underlining will be taken out. The first change is on page 3. It's the language that was proposed in the bullet point there, that the forms used by the shelter operators will provide data in a format specific with the HMIS recording process of Lee County with specificity as to Bonita Springs, deleting out the other language that Mr. Dolmer suggested. On number 3, discharge, I will be leaving in the word leaving shelter residency, but adding a new section A and renumbering the other sections to B, C, D. The new section A will read, discharge means the resident is no longer staying at the shelter and should not be construed as the daily departure from the facility for work. Okay, I'm about to, thank you. Another change, and Ms. Grady just pointed it out to me, we're going to add the word mental health status. The next change is to 10A on page 6. Those changes, again, as specified by Mr. Dolmer during the presentation, that the shelter must have available the Florida licensed professional authorized to supervise any necessary social worker and medical providers, and then adding a sentence, for purposes of this section, the supervising professional can be counted as one of the necessary employees able to provide services to shelter residents, for numbering. Management and planning, as Ms. Grady read to you on 12A. Adding in on page 8, the word reasonable conditions, just the standard for types of conditions. 13, the change to the 1,000-foot as voted on by City Council on Councilman McIntosh's motion, consistent with the changes as read by Ms. Grady. And I believe that's it. That's it.
Okay. Yes.
1, we haven't voted yet. 2, page 7, could we just look at this, because it says both genders may reside in individual rooms to promote family units. I don't know if you want to have, like, I mean, you know, there could be a problem with that.
Well, but part of this is going to be covered in, they have to come up with an operational plan, and that's got to be approved with that. And these are just general guidelines, I think, at the time. If they prove that their plan, that they don't have sufficient guidelines or protections, you don't let them do it.
Well, I mean, do people have to be married? Do they have to be whatever?
I'm hoping that they will provide that information to us.
Well, anyhow, it could be a funny situation.
It's probably something we shouldn't get into.
I hear that.
Okay? Anything else? Roll call.
Councilwoman Simons?
Aye.
Councilman Longcart?
Aye.
Councilman McIntosh?
Aye.
Councilwoman Martin?
Aye.
Councilman Slakta?
Aye.
Mayor Nelson?
Aye.
Councilman Simmons?
Aye.
Okay, let's go to the next one, and before we take a break here. This one should not take as long.
That was 1,000 feet?
Mr. Mayor, you can start your stopwatch right now. There's one slide.
And
after Audrey's done.
1 second, are you okay? Yes. Okay, we probably got about 10 minutes here, I'm betting.
Just want to make sure, are we still on?
We're
next
going to read,
agenda
we're going to
item.
read, do you need to read this one?
Yes, I do. I'm reading the title block into the record. This is an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs amending certain sections of the zoning ordinance that relate to social services, amending 4-622C46, use activity groups, social services, to restructure certain group classifications, amending 4-653, the use regulations for agricultural districts, amending 4-694, the use regulations for 1- and 2-family residential districts, amending 4-714, the use regulations for multiple family residential districts, amending 4-813, the use regulations for community facility districts, amending 4-843, the use regulations for conventional commercial districts, amending 4-934, the use regulations for planned development districts, creating 4-3071 through 4-3077 in Division 38, social services supplementary regulations, which are sections 4-3071, applicability of division, section 4-3072, purpose, section 4-3073, definition, section 4-3074, procedure for approval, section 4-3075, development standards for social service groups 3 through 4. 4, sections 4-3076, social service uses providing temporary shelter, section 4-3077, nonconforming establishment, providing for conflict, severability, codification, inclusion in codes, Scrivener's errors, and an effective date. Before John starts, let me get a few more things just off the record here. First of all, I've reviewed the affidavit of publication, and it is legally sufficient. I apologize for talking so fast during the title block.
She's awesome.
I will be removing the bolded area that are called editor notes that were placed in the ordinance for City Council's edification. I will also be referencing a newly adopted ordinance 13-04 as the operational, where we reference that ordinance in the ordinance. You did receive a memorandum from me, and that was the question that Councilman Simmons had earlier. I don't know if you wish for me to address it now or after the slide. I can address it now if you wish.
Why don't we go through the slides, and then we'll come back for some questions, okay?
We have one slide, Mr.
I beg
Mayor.
your pardon.
Point of information, please.
Yes.
On the, I voted yes on the 1,000 feet, or did I vote on the entire section?
You voted for
on
the
the
ordinance.
entire ordinance.
Mayor?
I want to change my vote. No. I didn't realize that. I thought it was 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
I agreed with that.
Mayor, point of information, Mayor. I believe the motion that was made by Mr. McIntosh was about the 1,000 feet, not the ordinance.
Hold on. Steve, what was your motion?
It was the motion to change the ordinance to read 1,000 feet.
But not to approve it.
So your motion wasn't to approve the ordinance?
I moved to approve the ordinance with a change of 1,000.
Thank you very much. That
Thank
was
you,
the
Mayor.
motion, to approve
Right.
the motion. So you want to change your vote to no?
No, thank you.
Gentlemen like to vote no. We're going to allow it at this point in time.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay?
We're still within that.
All right? Good. Carry on.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The changes to the Land Development Code in Chapter 4 we had discussed at your previous meeting, and during that discussion, there were no questions or comments that were requested to be addressed in this meeting.
Okay.
There was one point of clarification that was brought up by Ms. Montgomery between the first reading and today.
Hold on a second. I'm going to ask the people who are in the back there, Deborah, can we're still conducting business here. You're going to have to wait for a few more minutes, and then we'll be able to go ahead and all mingle, okay? Good. Go ahead. Carry on.
Yes, sir. Like I was saying, Ms. Montgomery raised a point to us that said that we are creating a new use group for social services, that being Group 5, and current properties have an entitlement to Group 4 now. And in an effort to carry previously entitled property into this change and through this change, we are proposing the following language so that there would just be no change in entitlements. This does not give anybody any rights to do something they don't have to do now, and it does not take anything away.
Okay. All right.
And that is the
All
only
right.
change we're proposing.
Good. And Peter, towards
was the
Peter's question, do you?
That is the question. That
Good,
was the
good.
answer. Is that satisfactory?
Well, I mean, if you look at the new and existing facilities section and the procedures, it's arguably not included in either.
Okay, so right now, the Social Service Supplementary Regulations 4-3071 says that this division applies to groups 3 through 5, right? And that's on page 47. On page 4, we have the different group 5 uses. And the group 5 uses are community residential homes and similar establishments providing long-term facilities where healthcare is incidental. And then it lists the type of uses, and it also includes some of the uses. As you can see, a community residential home was not part of the original Group 4, but it is, for Group 5, some of the uses that used to be in Group 4, and that would be home, the example that was given in the memorandum was homes for the deaf or blind, was moved from Group 4 to Group 5. So, some of the language, and we can have Alexis Crespo come up if you wish, she can tell why Group 5 do not need things where Group 4 needs certain types of conditions, because there's a difference in needs. But there are some that Group 5 does apply to within the supplementary regs. Not everything does it apply to. But as pointed out by Mr. Dolmer, when different master concept plans were received by Lee County, and mostly by Lee County, and then we accepted the work here, it either had social services, all groups, and some had only social services Group 1, Group 2, the lighter groups, but it either had all groups, or it would say social groups, social services, groups 1, 2, 3, 4. And in that case, because the uses in Group 5, in the new Group 5, would have been the uses in the old Group 4, we don't want the loss of those groups by virtue of the adoption of this ordinance. I don't believe that was the intent of council in adoption of this. So if, for example, they decide somewhere somebody wanted to put a home for the deaf, and there are some homes for the deaf or community, people who want to reside within a certain type of community, they can certainly do so, and it would be allowed to do so within this, but you would not deprive the people who have that use already in their zoning from being able to do so, because then we would have a Burt Harris Act situation.
Okay.
All right, will somebody need to demonstrate compliance with this, or will a amendment need to be brought forward?
The date of the approval will be all that's needed. If it meets the date that we're proposing, as you can see, January 1st of this year, If your property had that entitlement prior to that date, there is no additional evidence needed.
Okay.
All right? Okay?
Thanks.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, Mayor, I think it can be confusing for people, and I'm
Really?
confused. Yeah, because I always get confused by land use. Not always, but there are occasions. So what you're saying here, we're creating this group 5, right? Prior to, in chapter 34, which is now R4, that makes it confusing. This use 5 was considered 4.
Yes, ma'am. For the most
Okay,
part.
so basically, we're creating a group, but we're not saying that anybody who had it before is losing it.
That's what we're trying to do. Yes, ma'am.
So for all the operational thing that we just went through before, about 1,000 feet and all that kind of stuff, would the group still be allowed?
Totally different areas that you're looking at. One is a separation between shelter or shelter-type facilities. Group 5 do not tend to be as intense. They tend to be less intense, and those are not subject to that separation for that reason.
Okay, group homes, we don't even regulate those, so, you know, those are state, that's not our business. This is just about whether they're allowed in town. Are we allowed to do that?
Actually, if it's a community residential home, Chapter 419 of the Florida statutes regulates it. So there are some distance separation requirements in that state statute, and yes, you're correct, we are preempted from most of community residential homes, but not always. It depends on the size of the community residential home.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Any other questions for John?
I have a question.
Bill, go ahead.
Under the old Chapter 4, or
34.
34, excuse me, I looked at that, and you have created in Group 4 specifically homeless shelters. My recollection is that the old Chapter 34 did not have homeless shelters mentioned at all in any of the numbers. Is that accurate?
The word homeless shelter was not included in the old Chapter 34. The term was homes for destitute men and women.
But it was added to the new documentation shows it specifically under number 4.
Yes, sir. It was.
So it was
determined-
added. It was added new. It's brand new.
The name was changed.
We replaced
No,
the
it wasn't
antiquated
changed.
terms.
It's homeless shelters were not mentioned in Chapter 34 at all. It is now, and that's the way it is. But it wasn't in there before. It now is.
Well, John, what would you have considered a homeless shelter prior to this? A homes for destitute, in other words, a homes for destitute men and women?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ben, I understand that, but it was one of the things that I noticed, checked out, and I found out that homeless shelter, it became a new thing in this new program that we're doing.
Right. Good.
That's my point.
Thank you. Pete, you had one other thing?
I think I'm okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
good. Anybody else? Nope. John, nothing?
No, sir.
Good. Any clarification before we move on? Good. Is there a motion to proceed?
So,
We have motion and a second right here. Steve and Steve? Any other, oh, shoot, we got to have public comment.
Sorry.
See, I kind of just unraveled there. Anyone wishing to speak to this ordinance at this time, please come forward. I apologize for making a motion a second first. And Bill, could you bring lights up?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, can you see that? Who is that?
Thank you, Neil Montgomery for the record, and I do want to point you to pages 3 and 4 that they just addressed, because you will see, strike through and underline, uses that word, struck out. And so if you don't adopt that language, then I agree with Audrey, you are taking uses away, and that clearly is a Bert Harris. And so I think you do need to make sure. Now, what I'm not as clear on, and I heard what John said, is that the ordinance we adopted earlier doesn't apply to homes for the deaf and things like that. But you do have a note on page 47 that says, approve PDs that include social services groups 3 through 5 in the schedule of uses prior to May 1st are subject to the regulations in Article 7, Division 38. And so I'm not exactly sure, because that seems to be definitions, so I just want to make sure that somehow or other that doesn't take you back into the process we just talked about. And I heard you say that it doesn't. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Good. Thank you very much. Anything else at this time? We'll close public comment. We have a motion and a second. Did you understand what Neil was getting at there? Right, good? Okay, good. All right, roll call.
Councilman Longcart?
No.
Councilman McIntosh?
Yes.
Councilwoman Martin?
Aye.
Councilman Slakta?
Aye.
Mayor Nelson?
Aye.
Councilman Simmons?
Aye.
Councilwoman Simons?
Aye.
Okay,
May I say one thing before we close?
sure.
The mayor has taken a beating over the last year on a lot of these things, and frankly, we wouldn't have the process we have had with the citizen input and the way this turned out without his leading that process, and I personally thank you for that leadership.
You're quite welcome. Listen, all of you, we're going to take a recess now. Aren't you happy? Mm-hmm. I think all of you happy. But I want to thank you very much for your conduct tonight. You've made me proud. Thank you so much, everyone out there in the audience. We're going to recess.
Thank you, Ben.
About 10 minutes.
We're almost done.
Oh, my God.
But